Mike Grover, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me, dude.
We just knocked out one of the most fascinating everyday carry pocket dumps I've ever seen, and the fact that you designed all that hardware is just astounding. It's awesome.
Thank you.
So we got connected through mutual friend Bryce Case Jr.
Yeah.
And thank you, Bryce. And man, we've been trying to make this happen for I think a year.
Yeah.
Over a year.
Over a year now.
So yeah, because I interviewed. He was last year's Thanksgiving episode.
Yep.
And we got connected right after he told me about the OMG cable, which you developed, and we'll get into that. But real quick, let me kick it off with an intro here.
Sweet.
So, Mike Grover, aka MG, you're a hacker, red teamer, entrepreneur, artist, security researcher, and educator. You work for Fortune 500 companies conducting red team operations to test and enhance their security. You design and build covert hardware implants that bypass and challenge computer security. You also run a business that manufactures and sells your hardware designs, which are now used by countless companies and governments to strengthen their own security. The most well-known hardware design is the OMG Cable, a malicious USB cable. You're also a husband and a father. And I'm sure I'm missing a whole slew of stuff, but at least that paints the picture.
Thanks, man.
But I want to do a life story on you. You know, some of the things that you have developed, and then probably go down some rabbit holes with cybersecurity. Maybe I love knowing what China and Russia are up to, if you have any insight into that. But before we start anything, everybody gets a gift. So,
All right. Ooh. Gummies.
Vigilance League gummy bears. So made right here in the USA, legal in all 50 states.
All right.
So, I know you guys got some fun gummies out there in California, but this is just candy. So
I'm going to eat some now, man. These are...
go right ahead.
Want some?
Yeah, I'll take some of those. Yes. Thank you.
I'll see if I can not eat these by the end of the show.
Good luck.
Nice. Those are good.
Not bad, huh?
Wow.
But, sorry, I'm going to talk with my mouth full. But, Mike, I got a Patreon account. It's a subscription account. It's, we were just talking about before, right before we kicked this off, about starting businesses and how this started in my attic, and we're both entrepreneurs, and so developed a Patreon very early on. They have been the key component to how I've built my business, and a lot of them have been here since the very beginning. So one of the things that I do is I give them the opportunity to ask each and every guest a question. And so this is from somebody anonymous. What's the simplest trick hackers use that 99% of people still fall for every day?
Asking. Just ask them for access. Granted, you gotta kind of cloak it a little bit, but you pretend to be somebody you're not. And for instance, like I'm your IT department. I'm your HR. You call them up, you email them, and you say, I need you to do a thing real quick. And that process will generally have them maybe entering their password, for instance. Except it's into something you control. And at that point, you've got their password. That is a method that is still heavily used and constantly works.
No kidding. That actually happened to us here.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. We had to have Brian Montgomery jump in and save the day. But, yeah, it was, we got an email saying, we want you to be on this podcast.
Yep.
And I thought it was bullshit. We had a staff member that kind of like pushed me to do this. And of course, everything was in a rush. And boom, We
Yep.
saw that. Then they got into our Facebook and almost hacked everything.
Yep.
Took it all.
Yeah.
And Ryan was able to jump in and save the day kind of last minute there. So
Nice.
thank you, Ryan. But what else? What's another one though?
I mean, that is like the go-to, right? Like, I mean, you can walk into a building, but why do that when you can just ask from halfway across the world, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, most companies you'll still be able to walk in and do all that stuff. It's just not worth the risk unless they've got that level of security kind of locked down where it's like, okay, you can ask anybody in the company for their password, they can give it to you, but you can't do anything with it because, we got like two-factor turned on or stuff like that. Different security controls and detections that suddenly requires physical access to, you got to take more risks to do that. And it's a lot more skill, a lot more work to make happen.
Interesting. Well, I had a little chat with Bryce before he got here today, and we were talking. And by the way, have you ever seen that video of him at the Dead Mouse concert? He's up there, he's rapping and falls off the stage. I got to roll this clip. You've seen this, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
I got to roll the clip. It's hilarious. He brought something up that wasn't in your outline.
Oh shit.
And so might be a little uncomfortable, but I got to ask it. And I think it's a good question because it sets the stage for the entire interview and everything we're going to talk about. But he says, in case he chickens out, ask Mike about his design being so good that they were copied by the most well-known hacker of all time, Kevin Mitnick, also known as Condor. So I got to hear about this, man.
Oh, okay.
What is this? The OMG cable?
Predecessor, right? So I had been doing lots of designs of malicious cables, right? And I had some really early proof of concept just to show it's possible. No wireless connection, really tiny payload capability, a few dozen, maybe 100 keystrokes, right? It really limits what you can do. It's really slow. I mean, we're not hitting that 1,000 keystroke per second thing. We're maybe a dozen. Really slow, right? But it's like it worked, right? You can't remotely update it, can't do anything. But it worked. I want to show the world because, hacker, you want to share the information stuff and work with other people. I didn't see it as like a product. It was just more like project, more like art, like, hey, cool, look at this thing. And yeah, he reached out, wanted to kind of collaborate and, have me, build one for him. And I started on that process, but I didn't have enough time to complete it with his work constraints as well, because he didn't have time and stuff. And eventually what happened, I didn't know about it, but he went to someone else and said, make this for me. And
no shit.
Yeah, it was not like I didn't know about it until it came out. And then the thing is, it wasn't very good. And I was just like, dude, first of all, it's not very good. This sucks. I wish making this a proper product, but also I was like, hey, if you had the resources, like fucking, I could have used that. Because I was just doing this on the side, right? But we have, solved things since then. I think there's certain levels of communication and misunderstanding. So I don't want to be like, oh, he's the worst. But, lessons learned as well of like, if it's something you can turn into a product, maybe wait until it's ready, things like that. Which is exactly what I did with the OMG cable, right? That's where it's like thousands of times better.
And I mean, as enraging as I'm sure that was, it's also pretty flattering that,
oh, yeah.
Is he really like the world's most renowned hacker?
I mean, well, so RIP, he's no longer around.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But the way he would be introduced, I don't know, but it was always the world's most famous hacker is the tagline that was used.
What made him so famous? He,
God, I need a refresher on this, but basically he had gotten the attention of the FBI and they were hunting him down for getting into various places. A lot of social engineering tricks and stuff like that. And kind of a cat and mouse game. There's a movie called Takedown, right? So good movie, check it out. But he, went to prison then, and was pretty unfairly treated. There was a whole free Kevin movement where, they were doing, I think they put him in like solitary or something because they thought he could like whistle into the phones and like launch ICBMs or some shit like that.
Oh my God.
Like this is like back when everybody's like, oh my God, hackers, just evil wizards. It's still like that today, but it was much worse back then. They had no idea what was even possible. So yeah, he was held for much longer. I don't think, I don't want to misspeak here because I don't remember the particulars, but he was held for a very long time, pretty unfairly, eventually got out, and then went into InfoSec as like a profession, using that.
And then tried to take your OMG cable.
I mean, I guess he knew it looked good, so
Hey,
he's good at that.
hey, you got the world's most renowned hacker taking your stuff. That's pretty cool. And,
Yeah.
Sounds like everything worked out today. So
Oh yeah, definitely. And just for the record, he got a pretty unfair shake at life. He ended up, I think he got pancreatic cancer, and he died before his first kid was born, which is just fucking terrible.
Man,
so yeah,
that's horrible.
I've since met up with his wife and cleared the air. So we're
Good
good.
for you.
We're good.
Good for you, man. Well, let's get to you.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I want to do a life story. We got to get into the OMG cable stuff and all the other stuff that you're designing, some red team stuff. But actually, in your bio, I know what red team operations are.
Yes.
Or red cell operations. But could you explain that to the audience?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a lot of, it depends where we're talking about red teaming, because there's military red teaming, which I would love for you to give me a couple stories on. Because, I'm sitting in a room with a guy who probably knows that really well, way more than me. So it would be a little ridiculous for me to explain that to you. But red teaming in terms of like corporate cybersecurity is a subset of pen testing. Pen testing is find the holes. Tell us the holes, right? That's cool, but it doesn't quite test how someone responds. I think there's this I think it's a Mike Tyson quote where everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, well, it's maybe a little aggressive in context of cybersecurity, but how do you solve that? Like in boxing, you train, you get punched in the face, right? And then, well, okay, now it's not going to be new when it happens. So you might have a plan, but are you going to execute on the plan? Are you going to miss some steps? Is motion going to get involved? And also, I can find holes at different layers, but red teaming is going to be repeating exactly the entire chain. It's often called a kill chain, where you're connecting all of these different vulnerabilities to go from completely outside to completely to the crown jewels, take them out and succeed, and then you show how you did it after the fact.
How'd you get into that?
Good question. So kind of almost don't even know, but over the course of just life, and I started off as just help desk IT sysadmin, where you learn a lot of things. And at the time, I didn't think it was very applicable, but those are all the systems and the nuances and just the weird compromises you learn. Like, oh, I don't have enough budget, so I'm going to do it this way. Or you learn about the end users that you're supporting as help desk and all the problems they run into, and they're running into policy that stops them from working. So they're going to do this. That's going to cause a degradation in security, but it's really common. You know that, having been in help desk and sysadmin. So you start to connect these things together, and it becomes this really valuable just bucket of information for, how would I get into the company using that? And, got really into security for a while. It's also a piece of that role. You're going to run all the systems for IT. You got to keep them secure too, especially in small companies where you don't have dedicated security. It's like, no, you are the security. So you got to learn it that way, which requires you to think also, how does an attacker do it? Because you got to defend against that, right? So eventually, I just kind of got bored of doing IT and made the jump into security. Started learning, actually, Bryce. So good connection on this as well. So I had known Bryce for a long time, And I think it was like 2013, first time I went to DEF CON, Hacker Security Conference, biggest one in the world in Vegas every year. And I decided, oh God, what was this? So there's these unrecorded talks they also do in certain areas. He was on stage. I think he was doing something with like Bitcoin at the time, and he had this like telepresence robot on stage for a guy who was on house arrest. Like he couldn't come, so he brought a telepresence robot to be like Bryce's partner on the stage, and it was just wild watching this. And so I'm in the audience. I'm just like, oh yeah, Bryce, Buddy Cracker. I know that guy. I'm gonna go see what he's doing. And then he gives the talk, and after it's done, I'm like, hey, yo, what's up? Like, never met you before. But from that point on, we kind of, our relationship grew, got to know him a lot better. But he also DJs, as you know, and he was DJing for a guy called Fuzzy Nop, flip that around. Fuzzy Nop was DJing for him because he also MCs and sings songs, right? So he needs someone, to play that. So Fuzzy Nop was DJing for him on a lot of his shows. So I met him, and well, he is the one who had built out a red team for a new company. Not a new company, new red team for a company, large company. And he ended up pulling me over into that team. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah,
I love that guy, man.
Bryce is
I
great.
love that guy. Even though I'm excited for the new administration, there's a lot of tension in the world. Russia, Ukraine, the border, inflation, who knows what could happen next. Me, I'm not waiting around to find out, and I don't think you should either. Look, it's simple. I want you to go to ShawnLikesGold.com. You'll learn about my partners over at Goldco. They're a great precious metals company that I trust. They're one of the top-rated gold companies in the industry with impeccable customer service, and they support the show. And for my listeners, they're going to give you a free gold and silver kit where you can learn about how precious metals could help you protect your money. You could also get up to a 10% instant match in bonus silver on qualified orders. That extra 10% is a great way to get started. Plus, it helps support the show. All you need to do is go to ShawnLikesGold.com. That's ShawnLikesGold.com. Make sure you do everything in your power to help protect what's yours. Performance may vary. Consult with your tax attorney or financial professional before making an investment decision. It's a new year, and if you need to hire for your business and want an easier way to find qualified candidates, head to ZipRecruiter. And right now, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/SRS. ZipRecruiter is the top-rated hiring site according to G2. How fast does ZipRecruiter's smart technology start showing your job to qualified candidates? Immediately. ZipRecruiter's powerful matching technology works fast to find top talent, so you don't waste your time or money. You can invite top candidates for your job to apply and even encourage them to apply sooner. Here's to a new year of hiring made easier with ZipRecruiter. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. See for yourself. Try ZipRecruiter for free at ZipRecruiter.com/SRS. That's ZipRecruiter.com/SRS. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. Well, let's took a little sidetrack there, but let's get to you and let's get to your
I'll let you get there eventually.
Where'd you grow up?
All right. So I grew up in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Brothers, sisters?
Yeah, I got a younger sister, 4 years.
You guys tight?
Yeah, we don't keep in touch as much, both like super busy, but we could definitely be a lot closer.
Is she a hacker too?
No, she culinary.
Culinary.
Yeah, I picked that up from my dad as well. So my dad, he was in the Navy as a corpsman for a while. I think it was like 4 years, submarine stuff. But medicine, both my parents were in medicine, and they did a lot of DIY stuff. So they built their house from the ground up, designed it from the ground up. So I was in that kind of raw materials environment. Like the house never actually fully got completed, which is actually kind of cool because there's constant like tools, raw materials around growing up. I thought that was an amazing experience. Dude, I remember shoveling out the house because it snowed before we got the roof on.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I was pretty young at that time, but it was still like, impacting. Like, oh, look, you can just do stuff, right? Like that wasn't their profession, but they just picked it up, learned it, how to design it, built nearly everything. I think they didn't do was the masonry for the basement because the trusses, and then they were rushed with the weather to get the drywall up. So they paid for that. Everything else they did by hand.
Wow.
Pretty cool. So, but yeah, culinary, right? That's going back there. Yeah, he's really into, he was really into just cooking and really, really good at it. Both of my parents were doing barbecue competitions for a while as well. They're just
Jack
focus
of
on
all
something.
trades.
Yeah, just get into it and go. And I think that was a pretty good learning experience. And obviously that had an impact on my sister, who got into culinary as well and just did some great stuff there. I didn't pick that skill up.
So what were you into as a kid?
Oh God. Definitely electronics type stuff. So it just depends on the stage. Video games first. Lots of video games.
What video games? What platform?
I guess it depends over time. So there was the console stuff like Nintendo, etc. So let's go all the way back. So Atari, and this is kind of like the first hardware hack actually. My dad. So if you remember the Atari joysticks, it's a joystick and a single button, right? That's the whole controller. And we were playing the game Tank, right? You just move around like you're in a tank and you fire at stuff, right? My dad took some speaker wire, a tongue depressor, medicine, right? And a random button probably from Radio Shack and just taped it to a stick to the tongue depressor, ran the wires off and soldered it to the controller so that I could have access to my own little like button when I don't know, I was like 4 or something. So I could fire the tank while he steered it around, right? Yeah, I thought that was pretty cool, and it kind of stuck with me, right? Like you just modify stuff, like hacking stuff. So very simple, but that was the first video game, first hardware hack, right? That I was kind of exposed to, and yeah, spent lots of time on like Nintendo, Super Nintendo. And then I got into Quake. Quake was extremely impactful for me. That's where I went from, consoles to the computer in the house that we had. I used it for like encyclopedia, like you could chat with people online, cool, but it's more just a tool, right? Then Quake. You got to start learning things back when Quake came out. It was late 90s, right? You got to learn like how dial-up worked, how to connect to other people so you could do multiplayer. Like that wasn't just like a button or two. It's you got to learn stuff. And even running Quake, it's like, oh, you just don't launch it, reboot the computer in DOS mode and stuff like that. And so you're learning how a computer works, but that also that's where we get into hacking as well. That's kind of like the inflection point of a lot of things. Also, 9 Inch Nails was built into that game. They did all the sound effects, and you can see the 9 Inch Nails logo on the crates of nails as well if you look in there. But yeah, that was also kind of impactful for me with the stylistic stuff and the art.
Damn, so you started the hacking stuff at like, how old were you? We're the same age.
That was high school.
Atari was high school?
No, Atari, oh God, I don't even know when that was. Yeah, I mean, just really.
It's like 5 or 6.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Damn.
80s. It was 80s. Like, I don't know. But yeah, Quake was high school.
Right on. So well, let's fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Were you into anything other than electronics, or was it always just electronics? And I shouldn't say just. Was it always electronics?
I mean, it's all connected in some way. Like I was into cars as well. Like, part of it was just like making the car continue to run, but also like let's add sound systems to the cars and learn how that works, which is electronics in some way. Also got into water cooling the computer to overclock it, but that required learning like
water cooling.
Yeah.
What do you mean, water
cooling? These days you can just buy a kit and install it, right? But most computers are air cooled. Like you got a little fan in there blowing out the heat, right? If you overclock a computer, you can get a lot more power out of it, especially back in 90s, early 2000s, but it would dump a lot of heat, lots more heat, and air cooling couldn't keep up with that. So what you do, you take little water blocks, basically like a little piece of copper, strap it to the processor, the video card, and run water loops through it, kind of like I don't know how to better explain that, but it's like a little maze that the water would take through the channels on this block, and it would pull the heat out, and you would dump it. And at the time, God, it was a Chevy Chevelle heater core that was just like the perfect size, and you could use that as a radiator with a larger fan on it. So instead of using the small fans that you'd find on like laptops or even desktops that maybe it's like that big, you just fan that big, and it keeps it quieter while dumping heat, and you can just run these things really hot. And I had to learn how to make those things, right? So, you get a pond pump from like a fish store, you get the Chevelle heater core, get all the tubing wire together, but I had to mill out, I didn't mill it, I drilled it. I would use a drill press because I could not afford access to that. It was like $100 drill press at the time. And you just do like cross drilling through all different directions, plug it up, and get this cool spiral pattern where the water would go through it and pull heat out of all your devices. And you got to learn about things like corrosion. Like you got copper and brass and aluminum, and like these things are going to start to corrode. So you learn the chemistry behind how to prevent that from happening, because you don't want corrosion, because then your computer's going to have water all over it when it leaks. Just for example, right?
So, wow. So you're like a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
You like taking stuff apart, putting it back together, figuring out how it works, how to fix things at a very young age, and it just exploded. Into
basically.
What you're doing now. How'd you get into hacking?
So I'm going to put that on Quake as well. So you're playing online games, right? And you learn you can do like interesting things. You start controlling things in weird ways, and it kind of escalates. You're like, wait a second. There, at the time, there was no what we call like client-side security or client-side like integrity checking. Like the game files I had on my machine were unique to me. Like you would download them from the author. At this time, we were actually installing it from CD drives, and you just expected to not mess with that, but nobody's stopping you. You go and mess with the player models, for instance, and you can like add a really large cross that goes like 10 feet above, below, and all sides of this person, right? So now you can see him running around a corner because this post is sticking out them, and you see him coming from the corner. They don't know that, but it was a good approach. Or a lot of dark spaces, right? You can't really see people in the dark. You're like, cool, I'm gonna add a fluorescent color to their skin, and there they are. They're glowing in the dark, right? See-through walls, right? Like you've got these textures that would go on the walls, and they're opaque, but they don't have to be. You just set them to transparent, and suddenly you're seeing through the walls, and that type of stuff was. I had more fun like figuring out how to do it than actually doing it. But that kind of just opened the door of like, there's rules and there's expectations, but there's also not many people checking. Like, best way to kind of, God, I don't want to get like philosophy, get into philosophy here, but there's this kind of beautiful, I think it's Jacques Rancière, who defines like police politics, right? As like you got a road, right? And it's painted. There's lines, and everybody just obeys those, right? And he connects that back with politics of like, oh, you're told to vote and do all these things. It's like, okay, but like, what if you don't follow the paint on the road? What if you go off the road? What if you get really close to the edge? And most people they see those lines, they're going to get right in the center of the road because that's what you're supposed to do. It's like, well, what happens if you don't? That's interesting to me. That's where weird things start to show up, like unintended designs, unintended powers and capabilities, just unintended failures, unexpected failures. It's really fascinating to play with that, play on the edges, see how close you can get. And I guess now that you make me kind of say this, that's probably a good descriptor for how I think about a lot of things, like art, everything across the board is find the boundaries and what happens if you go on either side of it.
Interesting. Did you get involved in any of these like hacking type communities?
Oh yeah. So Yeah, so like late 90s, more early 2000s. There's a lot of online communities. Some are big. I mean, I think the really big ones you would know of, that most people know of, rather, like 4chan and like Something Awful, right? Big places that had like the bigger names at the time, but there were also much smaller, like specific topics. Water cooling, right? There was a water cooling. There was a bunch of them, but there would be water cooling communities where people just share their techniques and stuff, so they could all just improve upon it. And yeah, there were also hacking themed ones. So Bryce and Digital Gangster was one of those. He was that is one of the several communities I have known him from. And yeah, this was also at a time where online space and meet space were very separate, right? Like online dating, for instance, that was like what? Now it's like that's all the kids do these days. It's really weird. But I met my wife from one of those online communities. But eventually those worlds start to blend together when you spend more time in there, and you're spending most of your time in there and just talking to these people. Eventually, I mean, it depends on the community. Maybe not so much like Digital Gangster, where it's like just raw crime happening, is maybe not the best idea to meet up for many reasons. But certain lesser criminal communities, meet up with people, and those worlds start to blur together. And it's a little bit different than the 2024 is, where it's just everything is just mixed together now.
Yeah. How'd you meet your wife?
Yeah, I mean, so we posted on some of one of the communities out there. I think it was like from hardware overclocking. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I moved out to California. That's its own story we can go into. But when I moved out, I think it was like the first week, just like, hey, anybody in this community like around want to hang out, show me around town? And she was one of those people who was like, yeah. And yeah, it just kind of grew from there.
Is she a hacker too?
Not a hacker per se. Gamer, photography, art.
Cool.
Yeah.
How long you guys been married? Sorry to put you on the spot with that one.
What year is it anymore? I think it's 10, 14 years. It's 2009. 15 years?
2009.
14. Yeah, so almost 15.
15 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known her since 2004. So
what do you think the secret to a successful marriage is?
Oh my God.
Bet you weren't expecting that one.
No, I was not expecting that one. I'm gonna have to think about that one, man. I don't know, man. Just I guess I can connect this back with everything. Is just kind of understanding. I mean, humans are a mystery to me, but at the same time, there's so much complexity, and it creates just like everybody's different. Like everybody wants to put everybody into a bucket. Like there's the us and there's the other, but like, dude, humans are messy and complicated and unique, and understanding that helps a lot with everything, whether it's being in a marriage or attacking somebody to get into a company. It's like, same thing, right? Like understanding, but very different motives and goals behind that. One is just truly understanding the person and working with them, and the other is kind of the inverse of that.
Right on. Let's talk about, some of the stuff that you did. What are some of the big hacks? Were you involved in any big hacks?
Not like hands-on keyboard. I like to watch those. So for most of my time, like any of the hacking stuff, that was me. I kind of viewed it as like entertainment. Like it wasn't like power, money, or anything like that for me. It's just like, let's just have some fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can mess around. Like I would do stuff on like some of the communities as well. Like I knew the people who would run the servers, so you can mess around in there and like.
What kind of stuff?
I mean, okay, for instance, I gotta remember all the complexities here, but this community was like very liberal with like temporary bans and stuff like that. So, I got myself banned and I'm like, I'm gonna get around that, right? And then they could not get me banned in this environment because they had some add-ons that they were using for this vBulletin. I think it was vBulletin, might have been PHP BB. Anyway, one of the large platforms at the time just had a lot of plugins that just gave me raw write access to the database effectively. And, I could post through that. And, they had a lot of fun chasing me down in that situation. I'm just like, how are you still here? So very, lighthearted in that instance. They were more interested in how it was done than like, oh, you're breaking into my stuff. So, yeah.
Right on, Brian. Well, let's move into. I don't know, a whole lot about hacking. So
Yeah.
I would love for you to expound on, how you got into it, or not how you got into it, but some of the things that you just found fascinating that kept you going all the way up until building your own hardware.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, going back into the youth for a little bit, something probably important. I had a phase where I was really into magic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sleight of hand, deception, that type of stuff. I think that was middle school, right? Actually, got my first taste of authority not being super ideal for me. Brought in a fake cigarette to middle school, right? And it's the peak of the dare situation, right? Looked perfect. Looked like it was actively lit, and you blow on it and like, talc, I think powder came out, but it looked like smoke. That got confiscated. Friend and I got pulled down to the principal's office. I don't know. I think I got suspended for not taking the situation seriously enough. I'm like, how you can take this seriously? Like it's a fake cigarette. But I think my friend pointed out, oh yeah, that's right. They brought on the cops to test it because some of the talc powder came out. And they're like, that might be cocaine. And my friend made probably an unhelpful comment of like, that's not even how you would smoke cocaine. Like, but anyway. Sleight of hand, that gets into like deception and the human aspect, which is often forgotten a lot in hacking. People are like, oh yeah, it's just knowing computers really well. Definitely a huge piece, but like it's people as well that have to be kind of like manipulated. You got to understand them. You got to convince them to do things, which is the most common way of getting into so many systems. You say, hey, like, I'm from your IT department, let me in. And you got to know how to make that sound legit. And, if somebody's like, I don't know, and like, okay, let's use some urgency to like make them kind of panic a little bit where their decision-making goes down. And they're panicking and they're like, oh, I just got to do the thing, or, I might get fired, or this bad thing's going to happen. Or, there's so many different like psychological triggers that come into play and create this misdirection.
Interesting.
And you're like, oh, it's like, sleight of hand for psychology, right? So you push people into different directions and you get them to reveal their password or run an application on their computer that just gives you access to everything, and that overlaps with the technical and the hardware and all these other things. And just, I guess, being a generalist, now that you make me think about it, it just allows you to kind of glue all of those things together. And I guess, at the time before I officially got into like paid security, I always thought that was a weakness of like, oh, I've never specialized in anything. I couldn't possibly keep up with people who did specialize. And I mean, that is true. There's like every person I work with that specializes, they go so far into just absolute wizardry that amazes me. And I could never keep up. And because I just cannot sit down and focus and be like, I'm going to do this thing and that's all I'm going to do. I'm like, I get 80% of there and I want to go play with another thing. But it worked out. It's great for the entrepreneur type perspective as well, where you get to juggle all the things. Keeps you busy, right?
Yeah. Well, Mike, let's take a quick break.
Yeah.
And when we come back, I want to get into some of the hardware that you've made, and
absolutely,
and how that happened, and who's using it, what governments, all that kind of good stuff.
See what I can say.
Going online unprotected is like leaving your door unlocked when you leave the house. Maybe you trust some of your neighbors, but what about random strangers? Do you trust all of them too? Do you really want to take that chance? With ExpressVPN, you can stay safe online without having to trust anyone. Every time you connect to an unencrypted network, in a coffee shop, at the airport, really in any public place, your online data is not secure. Anyone on that same network can gain access to and steal your personal data. ExpressVPN changes that as easily as opening up the app and clicking one button to get protected. I've been on the road speaking with all kinds of people, from health gurus to world leaders, and data security is extremely important to me. ExpressVPN helps defeat hacking attempts by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between my device and the open internet, so you don't have to worry about who else has access to your information. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/SRS. That's expressvpn.com/SRS, and you can get an extra 4 months free. expressvpn.com/SRS. This episode is sponsored by Roka. Roka is a performance eyewear brand for people who want to invest in themselves. Roka manufactures premium sunglasses, prescription eyeglasses, and readers, and cuts all of their lenses here in the U.S. at their headquarters in Austin, Texas. Roka recently partnered with one of my favorite guests, Dr. Andrew Huberman, to launch a new line of glasses called the Wind Down Collection. Guys, I've tried these. You know I have problems sleeping. I absolutely love these frames and lenses. They're available with and without prescription and have a proprietary red lens that helps filter out short wavelength light. Short wavelength light is in pretty much all artificial light, and it's terrible for your sleep. Roka let me try a pair of these things, and I can feel the difference whenever I wear them. I wear them in the evening after the sun goes down. I pretty much start it at dinner, and I wear it until bed. And let me tell you, these things work. With so many options in eyewear and wellness products out there, it's a relief to know the glasses I'm wearing help two things I really care about: my vision and my sleep. And as a business owner with all the decisions I already need to make every day, wearing a pair of Roka's glasses is one of the best ones I've made. Check them out for yourself at Roka.com and use code SRS for 20% off site-wide at checkout. That's Roka.com with code SRS. All right, Mike, we're back from the break. I missed a couple of things in our outline here, so I'm going to have you pick it up with we're going to start with 2600, whatever the hell that means.
Oh, yeah. So all the security stuff I was doing, the times I was, doing help desk and stuff like that, security, for the most part, anything security connected was a hobby. So, even the overclocking and water cooling, I was hobby too. But yeah, 2600 is, kind of a hacker zine. I think they're quarterly. Just lots of people writing in to show, tricks they've done, whether it's with payphones, phone phreaking.
Wait, so what is 2600?
It's a hacker zine, basically. You can
like
go
a magazine?
like a little magazine. You can go to like Barnes and Nobles and get it.
Okay.
So yeah.
Wait, so what is it? Is it a book?
It's I think it's quarterly, where they will just publish a new set of like little like kind of articles written by different people that talk about how to hack something, how they hack something, just cheats on systems, just sometimes politics, just, hacker-minded stuff, right?
Gotcha.
It's pretty cool. But that was also, when I first got into that, phone phreaking and stuff was more popular then as well.
What is that?
Yeah, so that's hacking with phones, basically. So this goes back way, way long ago. I think the guy's name was Joy Bubbles, actually. Deaf guy. Or, sorry, not deaf. That wouldn't make any sense. Blind. And he noticed that there were like tones on a phone when, connecting to overseas and stuff. Like, this is way back when, you had to pay long distance and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, phone calls cost a lot of money. But he noticed they made like certain tones and stuff. So he had perfect pitch, and he would just whistle them back. And he noticed like the phone network would do stuff when you did that. So yeah, this is what we call in-band signaling. When you can hear the signal, the other end, there's the switch panel of the phone networks hear these tones, and it's like when you push numbers on the keypad and they make a tone, right?
Yeah.
If you do it in a certain sequence, it's like, oh, it hears that. There's other tones that the keypad doesn't make that tell it to do other things. It's where the 2600 comes from, actually, 2600 hertz. I can't remember what that does at the moment, but it would allow certain administrative type functions. And it's like routing around, like, oh, you paid and now you can route long distance or something like that, right? But
no shit. So hold on. So it actually has nothing to do with the keys that you're pushing. It has to do with the tone that they're programmed to make.
Yeah, I mean, at least at the time, things have changed since then. But yeah, it was just the tones. You could literally whistle those tones or hum them or whatever. So blue boxing was the other thing it's called. There's many boxes, many colors, but blue boxing just replicated that. You could literally quickly dial a number or whatever you want to do the administrative codes, play it right into the mouthpiece, and it would dial and do all these things.
Holy shit, I
Pretty
had
cool.
no idea.
Believe it or not, that's how Apple started. Woz and Jobs made some of their first money selling blue boxes. And
What is a blue box?
so it's the device that would allow you to more or less get free phone calls in the age of having to pay for long distance and stuff. Like go to a payphone, just pull out your blue box, hold it up to the mouthpiece, press some buttons, make it do what you want, call whoever you want. It was illegal at the time. There was a magazine it got into by a guy named Cap'n Crunch at the time. He got that name because there is a whistle inside of the Cap'n Crunch cereal that just happened to make that 2600 tone when you blow it. So he didn't have perfect pitch like Joy Bubbles did, but he had the whistle. So you just blow that into the phone, then you open up certain access with this Cracker Jack, or not Cracker Jack, but Cap'n Crunch style toy, which is really cool. But yeah, you can electronically reproduce those sounds, and that's what they were doing with the blue box. There was like red boxes and rainbow box. There was so many different boxes that would do different things that people would figure out, and they would share that with each other. And yeah, it was technically criminal, but a lot of people did it at the time. And yeah, Woz and Jobs took that money and started Apple with it. So
No kidding.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
I had no idea.
Very cool. And Woz, I would love to meet that guy one time, but he's a great example of like the old school hacker that was way more about like mischief and just figuring out how things work, and not necessarily anything criminal. So
Interesting.
great example.
Interesting. So you were working at this magazine.
Yeah, no, so I wasn't working there. I was just enjoying it, and there were a lot of just different cities would have like meetups. Like, hey, 2600 meetup, and you go and meet people that are into that stuff. And really tiny where I was from, so it didn't really go anywhere. But that was cool. It would get you into just more like, hey, here's other ways of hacking that you didn't know about, and just gets you to think like, wait, if I can do that, if they did that, what else can you do? Like, let's play. Like, it's all about exploration, experimentation. Like, it is a frontier too. Like, there's just unexplored space. Like, what else can you do? And yeah, I mean, outside of 2600, there's all the tools that people knew of the early online days, like Sub7 or NetBus.
What's that?
Kind of like a software Trojan, more or less. Basically, you get somebody to run it, or you run it on their computer, and it gives you remote access, right? You can fully control those machines over the internet, right? Open up the CD trays, close it up, just all kinds of wonky stuff that could be for pranks or it could be criminal. God, okay, there reminds me of one of the ways we used it. So again, I was way more about just pranking and having fun. My friend in high school, her name was Heather. She was really into like just spiritual stuff, and like she thought like spirits were in her house and stuff like that. It was a phase, right? But a friend and I had that running on our computer, and you could play noises in the middle of the night and shit, and just like it was terrible. It was so bad. And, the CD drives would open, just like it. She was terrified at the time, but later on thought it was funny. But yeah, for an example, right? Like you can just have fun. You can play with people. You don't have to actually straight up do crime. crime does occasionally pay though, so some people would get into that.
How would they use it?
For criminal,
Yeah.
God, this goes way back. We're talking like over 25 years ago. So I'm not 100% remembering this, but it would have been, you can do like file system modification, stuff like that. So you can get access to cookies, that'll contain like login information. You can just, get into
Gotcha.
people's accounts, send mail as them. And like, so, spamming was a huge thing back then. This where Bryce has gotten a lot of reputation from those early days, spamming. My friend at the time paid for his first computer by spamming for a porn company, actually, which is funny because he's cashing a sizable check for a porn company, and he's like, I don't know, he's probably like 14 or something at the time, getting like weird eyes from the bank. It's like, so yeah, that happened, but what else? Yeah, I mean,
Did you ever do anything illegal that's past the statute of limitations that you can share?
So a common misunderstanding about the statute of limitations is it's not just about the time in which has passed since you committed the crime. Depends on the crime, but many times the clock starts from discovery.
Interesting.
It's a common misconception that is good for a lot of hackers to realize. But, I'm sure. So the CFAA, Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, literally any access to any electronic interface that is not explicitly allowed, that's a federal crime. So literally what I described, getting onto my friend's computer, hey, that's a federal crime, even though they're cool with it and all this stuff. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So literally any of those things can be heavily punished.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's tricky, but
well, let's get into your first job.
Yeah. So first job, IT. Again, like security was not really a huge thing for the most part. All that was side stuff, but you still have to be conscious of secure design. My coworker was kind of my mentor at the time. He was ex-DOD, ex-Navy, had a lot of fun stories, but also got me more into security. We actually did our first security presentation for the company, kind of using some classics here. So the movie Sneakers, it's an amazing movie, still holds up today. If you haven't seen it, go watch Sneakers. It's awesome. But they did a lot of like physical security stuff. Like, if the door's got the hinges on the inside, you can kick it open. If it's on the outside, then you got to do something different. But what else? There's like the social engineering aspect where they wanted to get through like a front lobby attendant who had to like buzz them in. So they had someone else come in with like, I think it was like a delivery, like just creating a lot of stress. So one guy's like, yo, I got this delivery. Other guy's like, hey, I got my cake and my balloons. Can you just ring me up? And it just goes and escalates until he's like, just pushes the button and gets in, right? Of course, he didn't have a cake or anything like that. The balloons were to cover the camera. And the cake was, I think it was like a briefcase of some hardware that he had to like infiltrate into the company to go attack things, right? Great demo. We use that like, hey, here's some physical security things. Get you to think about it. And Catch Me If You Can, another thing where it's social engineering was used. And believe it or not, that movie based on Frank Abagnale, most of the stuff he said is actually made up. It was like the con on the con. But anyway, that was kind of a classic thing that still a lot of security presentations today will still use those. Anyway, long story short, kind of got me into the idea of educating on security instead of just playing and having fun and just the entertainment value. It's like, oh, you got to actually teach people. And like, there's a responsibility here of like teach people how to not fall victim. Also did some like live password cracking. Like back in the day, people were using real terrible passwords. So just adding some extra characters and stuff. We were able to, do password cracking just in the middle of this presentation of like, hey, this password you can get in 15 seconds. This one's going to take us 10 hours. In reality,
How do you begin to crack a password?
Basically, I mean, there's a lot of different ways. The way we were doing it was just brute forcing, being able to have the ability to just retry like word sets, like common password sets. You can just get those. There's a lot of password lists, what we call them, that will when you're going to brute force and you just want to try them. Well, like, hey, we know these are the common passwords. We know these are passwords from leaked breaches. Just shove them all together. Good chance somebody's reusing that somewhere. Good approach. There's cryptography and stuff, but
do you use the password manager?
oh yeah, definitely, highly recommended.
Which one?
1Password's pretty good. There's different ones depending on what you need.
Is Keeper any good?
I haven't looked too heavily into that one.
Okay.
I know somebody who's very into like that space that speaks fairly highly of 1Password, but it's been a while, so I wouldn't want to be like, yeah, this is the one, because that space is always changing. But
What constitutes a good password?
one that you don't know.
So a password manager.
Exactly. So if you don't know your password, it should be unique per site and just long as hell. And that means you're going to have to use your password manager to autofill that, or copy paste. Whatever, however you're going to do it, you're going to need the password manager to feed that back and log into the site. That combined with proper two-factor is going to secure so much when it comes to you being compromised by social engineering and phishing.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yep.
Let's move on.
Yeah. So, after that job, I was kind of bored of Wisconsin, and my friend at the time, the one who made the money spamming, he moved out to San Francisco a year earlier and worked for a company called Long Now. They're the ones doing the 10,000-year clock that a lot of people are associated with. I think Bezos is on there, but Stuart Brand.
Hold on, what's the 10,000-year clock?
Yeah, so it's this idea. I don't think they built it yet, but still working on it. But the idea is that they're going to put a clock, like an analog clock, in a mountain that stays accurate for 10,000 years. It's really to get people to think really long term. And
what do you mean?
Just like who's really, it's hard for people to think more like even like one election out of consequences, right?
Yeah.
Like 4 years, 10 years, maybe you think as far as your kids. Okay, cool. Well, how about 1,000 years? How about 10,000 years? Like that just changes how you think about the future and what you do, what matters, what doesn't. And it's kind of, it's almost like a thinking prompt for people. It's like nobody does it, like start doing it. This was also, I think it was formed shortly after the Y2K bug, which was hilarious because, computers started, a lot of the systems at the time were kind of birthed in the 70s, and, they had 2 digits for the year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the last 2. So, 78, 79, eventually what happens when you get to 99 and it rolls over to 00?
Yeah.
Is that 1900? Is that 2000? Oh, neither did the computers, right? But people were only thinking, a couple decades. That's enough. Somebody's going to rewrite my software. No, it's not. No, we're still using that software today. So that's where the Y2K bug came from. And it's like, cool, you needed to at least think, 1,000-year scale, so you can have 4 digits of space for your years. That was the entire Y2K bug. But I believe that was kind of around the same time that, okay, 1,000 years, what about 10,000? Is probably where that came from.
So hold on. They want to make a clock.
Yeah.
That's accurate for 10,000 years and put it in a mountain?
Yes, basically. The mountain, I think, is to keep it safe. They have to, like, keeping time for that period of time, like, you can't use any other timekeeping system. Like, the atomic clocks and stuff like that aren't accurate over that time span.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to account for, like, orbit variation, shift in the poles of the Earth, and all of these other things. Like they have a whole CAM system that readjusts the calibration of where that clock will be in X years over that span. It's absolutely crazy to like engineer with that in mind. It's like, nobody thinks about like orbit variance over time of the Earth or the poles shifting for the clocks they use. Like it's just not a factor. But what if you had to? I think it's really cool. But
interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, my buddy got a job just doing sysadmin for them and web development. And it's like, hey, if you want like a few weeks on my couch, go for it. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take you up on that. I'm going to use that to just move out there. I had no plan. I just like, I brought three.
No plan.
No plan. I'm just going to do it and figure it out. Which I guess is a very red team approach too. It's like you can't plan anything. You're just going to move and figure out what's in your bag of tricks as you go, and work around the problems. But yeah, I'm going to bring 3 suitcases. I prioritized one of them was like my gaming system. Like a whole suitcase was dedicated to just a computer. I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking, but yeah, that was 30% of my luggage when I moved out. Stayed out as cash for a bit. Got some random odd jobs doing like audio QA testing and stuff like that just to make it. And eventually got into the game industry doing sysadmin, IT, help desk stuff. And it just kind of grew from there. And yeah, I stayed there for like, I don't know, 15 years in the game industry. But on the side, being in San Francisco gave me a lot of unique perspectives. So first of all, Stuart Brand is kind of the guy that was running the show over at Long Now. Stuart Brand is one of the original people on like the hippie bus with like Timothy Leary and all this other stuff, right? They're going around the country doing the acid tests and stuff like that. But lots of just divergent thinking coming from that. And that was interesting just to kind of see. Like I didn't get that in Wisconsin. This is also kind of where like, you know, the PC revolution came from, that type of people. Right? We're just divergent thinking. What can we do? What mischief can be made? All this stuff. The maker space, maker fair was out there as well. So this is more like hands-on hardware hacking, not like security hacking, just like hobbyist hacking, like 3D printers. Let's just build some stuff. The kind of stuff you'd find at like Burning Man, right? Like the arts where you start mixing all these things together. That opened my eyes to just like different focuses and aesthetics. There's really good point to kind of deviate here. Something called beam bots. Actually, I'm going to pull up this laptop here to show you a picture because it makes way more sense when you see it.
Beam bots.
Yes, you're like, what? So BeamBots, BEAM, biology, electronics, aesthetics, mechanics. It's just a kind of a design philosophy around building little robots. So I just kind of had to show it because I don't know, you're probably picking up a bit of an insect vibe from this, I would assume, right? So it does a couple of things. First of all, there's no PCB on here. It's just freeform soldering. And all of these components, there's nothing extra for the aesthetics. It's all functional. So on the back, you've got a solar panel soaking up energy. This like thorax here, that's holding the charge from it. And then this is really cool. These are LEDs, but LEDs, when you shine light on them, actually emit a little bit of energy on the lines. So like a reverse solar panel, right? They're inefficient solar panel. But you can literally use them as eyes for this. So depending on what direction it's facing, it's gonna one eye is gonna see more light than the other. That's where the light source is coming from. And there's a really tiny brain in the middle. It's literally 4 logic gates, which is tiny. Like your phone has millions of logic gates in it, right? Like a calculator. My cable has hundreds of thousands of logic gates. This thing, it's got 4, okay?
What is a logic? What
So
do you call it?
basically,
A logic?
logic gate. So basically, all computing comes down to the concept of binary, on or off. Like think of it like a light switch, right? It's on or off. You can do math with that. Let's go through it real quick. Actually, like we got 3 light switches, right?
Yeah.
Got to think which direction we're going here. So we got 1 on, 2 off. That can give us a 1. Turn them all off. That's a 0, right? Easy. Now we put 2 in the picture. You turn 2 on. You basically double the last one. So if 2 are on, that's going to be 3. Basically, the first switch is the value of 1 or 0. The next one is 2 or 0. And then the next one will be 4 or 0. Next one is 8 or 0. That's binary math, right?
Okay.
And all decision making can kind of be based on this. So in this sense, it's very analog, but basically this will eventually fill up and have enough energy charged that these 4 logic gates are suddenly making a decision. Like, this side's filled. Which eye is sensing the most light? And at that point, it's going to fire the opposing leg with all the energy it's gotten here to steer towards that. So you have this little bug-looking thing that walks, right? And it just constantly steers towards the light source. And to me, I thought that was really cool because A, it focuses on aesthetics, which is not super common. And B, it uses really cool hardware hacks, like I said, with the lights here, that normally it's for emitting light, but no, you can reverse that and use it in an unintended way. And you can use really minimal logic to do what you want. And, you know, I've applied some of that to my cables as well. Not this specifically, just the mindset of like, you don't need 10 things in this cable. You can just strip it down to 1 if you're really creative.
Wow.
And that's how you shrink things. So that's kind of where that connects with, you know, like, hey, let's focus on aesthetics, but also minimizing and just using things in unintended ways to get more out of it. So that was kind of a good point in which it kind of just opened my eyes to also, you know, soldering and electronics, but also the art of it and all that. So yeah, beambots. That was a good pausing point for my many hobbies that I would pick up over time that eventually led into what would become the OMG cable.
I know everybody out there has to be just as frustrated as I am when it comes to the BS and the rhetoric that the mainstream media continuously tries to force feed us. And I also know how frustrating it can be to try to find some type of a reliable news source. It's getting really hard to find the truth and what's going on in the country and in the world. And so one thing we've done here at Shawn Ryan Show is we are developing our newsletter. And the first contributor to the newsletter that we have is a woman, former CIA targeter. Some of you may know her as Sarah Adams, call sign Superbad. She's made 2 different appearances here on the Shawn Ryan Show. And some of the stuff that she has uncovered and broke on this show is just absolutely mind-blowing. And so I've asked her if she would contribute to the newsletter and give us a weekly intelligence brief. So it's going to be all things terrorists, how terrorists are coming up through the southern border, how they're entering the country, how they're traveling, what these different terrorist organizations throughout the world are up to. And here's the best part, the newsletter is actually free. We're not going to spam you. It's about 1 newsletter a week, maybe 2 if we release 2 shows. The only other thing that's going to be in there besides the intel brief is if we have a new product or something like that. But like I said, it's a free CIA intelligence brief. Sign up. Links in the description or in the comments. We'll see you in the newsletter.
Let's move into Defense Distributed.
Yeah, so I think this was about 2013. So first, Defense Distributed, it's the company behind the Liberator, which is a 3D printed gun, and also the Ghost Gunner, which is a desktop mill that you can mill out a lower receiver. AR-15 platforms was the first commonly.
You're the one that did that?
I did not, no. So I got very interested in that. That was done by Cody Wilson. Let's crack that whole topic open a little bit more. So I think it was 2013. There was a lot of experimentation in like the 3D printing space with like firearms, right? Cody introduced it to the world. He basically inflicted this idea upon like the public psyche in like this amazing way that just caught my attention in a couple ways. First, it's this approach of like, hey, we're going to give this to the world in a way that is irrevocable. Like, going back to that, like the police politics concept I was mentioning, it's just like, okay, what if you create something that, like, there's voting and opinion having, but you create something to put in the world that nothing can change that at that point. I just thought that was just amazing from like the political standpoint, regardless of what topic or what opinion you may or may not have on firearms. The politics of it and the power of creation was amazing to me. And he did it with like a level of like art and bravado that was just like perfect for the delivery of this. And
So what you're saying is bringing something to the world that cannot be taken back, like Bitcoin.
yeah, another great example of like no opinion on that is going to change its existence. It exists. And like if you're thinking about like real politics and participating, like creation is one of the most powerful things you can do. And that's what I kind of learned from watching that. But yeah, I decided like, hey, I want to know, more what they're doing. And I've helped out with, security and, just computer stuff in general. Use what I had. Like, hey, can I help to a lot of different places, whether it's like Nine Inch Nails communities, just to get more insight of like how the artistic process works there, or in the case of Cody, just helping out with the security of that, just to kind of see how they work. A bunch of anarchists getting together, building a company, and just the whole like fight that they were in. It was very fascinating to me just to observe that, and that kind of stuck with me. Both the creation, the power of creation, and the artistic approach they took to it. That was one of the things I kind of had in mind when I first created the OMG Cable. It's like, hey, at the time I thought I was just going to open source this thing and put it out there. That ended up not making sense because it was really hard to make. You can't just DIY it. But yeah, it was one of the motivators in my head at the time when I was first kind of putting it out into the world. So yeah, one of the many things is just like, hey, this is a fixation. I want to know more, and I'm just going to focus on it for a while. So yeah, they're still doing their thing. Still managing.
So what did you do there?
I just helped out with some security stuff. Like I didn't
What kind of
have
security stuff.
network and IT. I mean, every company's got to have that, right? So I'm like, hey, you're probably a small shop, probably don't have the level of security, understanding for your systems, but I don't know, maybe I can help. So it just helped out, and it allowed me to get more insight into how they run things, and just more exposure to like how the artist works, right? Because that allows me to just kind of figure out. There's a lot of things I would experiment with, but I never found like my medium, right? Like as an artist, right? Like I got into music, I'm not that great with music, visual arts, not that great with that.
3D printing's everywhere now.
Yeah.
And so you were at the forefront of this. You were on the,
So I wasn't doing anything besides like the security for them. It's just kind of, even if I didn't do any work for them, just
being a small part of it.
Yeah, exactly. But even just seeing it happen would have been enough for me to kind of kickstart some things. It's another.
How did that come across your radar?
It was everywhere at the time. It was like in Wired and all these other places.
Okay.
Like 3D printed gun, firing. Like everyone can print a gun now, like regardless of laws. And that's that was kind of the message going around in the press. This was also kind of another pivotal time when the NSA ANT catalog. So Snowden happened around the same time. This is often incorrectly misattributed to him, but there were a lot of leaks that happened around that time, both with and without Snowden, that kind of opened my eyes to the level of games and just technology happening in computing. Yeah, I already knew a decent amount of it, but the ANT catalog, oh man, that it was just like, when you're growing up and there's like the spy tools in the back of the magazine, disappearing ink and all those things. This was like that on crack, dude. It was like they had a malicious cable in there. When was it? it was leaked in 2013. The catalog was dated 2008, and they were announcing in 2009 they would have these cottonmouth cables available for purchase to their ecosystem of whoever they sell to in the NSA. The price on those, I think it was a minimum order quantity of 50 with a $20,000 per cable price tag. It's like, oh, wow, amazing. But it had all these electronics inside, a radio inside, and that was cool. And actually, let's pull this up again. So, Cottonmouth. This is the page out of the catalog where it shows it's really chunky cable, like really, really thick hood, but they sandwich a whole bunch of different PCBs inside of this thing, and that stuck in my head, obviously.
So what does that do?
They weren't super specific about the exact capabilities, but it had a radio. It had some ability to manipulate USB. I mean, I would, based on all of my reading in here, it's the latest generation OMG cable is basically a dead match to its capabilities, from what can be deciphered from this page. So all the way down to like covert exfiltration and stuff like that.
What were they using it for?
That's a good question.
What's the thing? What does the sheet say?
It doesn't. It's more of a capabilities thing, like getting through and breaking security effectively. So I mean, I would imagine this gets implanted into spaces that are higher security. Like, if you can't just walk in and do stuff, or if you can't do the easy things, you're going to start having to use these types of tools to get into a place, have somebody plant a cable, and then you've got remote access. There were a lot of other tools in this space, like implanted video cables that you would implant on a monitor, so you could remotely read what's being displayed on the monitor. Lots of cool tricks like that. Some were long range, some were short range, but all kinds of crazy spy gear that would allow impressive capabilities that very few people in the private civilian space even consider defending against.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So what is the ANT catalog?
Yeah, I forget if there was ever a mention of what ANT stands for, but it was just this leaked catalog with all of the different...
It was a leaked catalog.
Yeah, somebody leaked it. It's a lot of people say it was from Snowden, but like if you actually trace it back, it wasn't. It was never at least attributed to Snowden. Yeah, that just came out, and you get to look at the amazing spy gear that is out there.
What's some other stuff that caught your eye?
Definitely those video cables. I'm trying to remember all the different things. If we can pull it up, actually. But yeah, you want to pull it up right now? I can pull it up on the internet.
Pull it up.
Sweet. All right, cool. So yeah, let's go through just a few of the pages of the ANT catalog. I haven't done this in a while, so
right
I'm a little
on.
rusty. But yeah, so let's look at just the hardware stuff. We got, let's see, what is this? This is a short to medium range implant for RF transceiver. It was, this is a component that adds RF to one of the other pieces they have in here, which they call a digital core, to provide a complete implant. So it's kind of like a customizable, build your own, what kind of implant do you need? They would put this into various pieces of hardware. There's actually, I think it's over here. Here's kind of another implant. They call this the Flux Rabbit. It's a hardware implant designed specifically for Dell PowerEdge servers, like a specific one. Hooks to, it's called a JTAG debugging interface. Basically, a lot of hardware has like a debugging interface. If you get access to that electrically, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. You can implant things at a really low level on that machine that give you all kinds of access, right? Gives you lots of data. So if you've got an implant that goes into there and hooks up to it, you've got like permanent access. Similar to like I was describing with the USB cable, with that covert exfiltration mechanism. But this is baked into the machine. So I would imagine the way this happens is during mailing interdiction. So, Dell ships a server over to the customer, right? And our government knows this is happening. They grab it in the mail, crack it open, put one of these inside, close it back up, send it off to the intended target, and now they've got long-term access inside there. Even if they wipe everything, like down to the hard drives, put new hard drives in, you can still get right back in. They would have to crack everything open and look at all the hardware to find this type of stuff. Really cool types of implants.
Wow. And there's no way to know that.
I mean, there are
That they take
ways,
it
but yeah.
apart.
Yeah, you got to know what you're looking for, basically.
Do you worry about that stuff at all?
I mean, it depends. Like, me personally, no. I know the types of targets that this is destined for, and like, I'm not one of those targets.
What kind of targets is that?
I mean, the Israeli pager situation, great example of like, do I worry about my pager exploding? Like, I'm not Hezbollah, so no, I'm not worried. Just for example, just to put a very pointed like answer to a very current topic. For instance, right? Mm-hmm. Now, there are certainly lots of gray area. We've seen lots of gray area where it's like, wait, you're doing surveillance on U.S. citizens, and like that generally isn't happening like with hardware implants and stuff like that. That's access to telcos, internet providers, and yeah, that's. I operate very openly, so it's not, I'm a little less concerned, but it's more of a political and philosophical, like, when nobody's got privacy, it changes society in ways that aren't very good. That's where I'm more worried.
How often do you think the U.S. was used on its own citizens?
I mean, this specifically, like, I would suspect
these types of things.
Well, hardware implants. Let's go with hardware. I don't know how often hardware implants would be used. That tends to be super targeted. Like, and super targeted also generally, I would hope, means significant more legislative, legal oversight, where, you're getting the warrants and all these other things. Whereas these really wide net things, which hardware is much harder to make wide net. Wide nets where you can collect all the things because you've got access to telco, phone, internet type providers, and you're just slurping everything up. Yeah, everybody would then be pulled into that. That's the kind of stuff that Snowden showed, right? Mm-hmm. That's a different story. That's everybody get pulled into that one way or the other type problems that occur. So do you have to worry about people getting, breaking into your network and just causing problems in your life? I don't. That's a complicated topic. Like, it's more privacy invasion at that point, and it's like, what are we worrying about? Are we worrying about our personal safety, our personal freedoms, society as a whole, and the health of it? If they, and a free press, like it's a very large, complicated topic.
Do you think China's putting this stuff into the electronics that we're buying from them?
I mean, not like in the sense of like consumer levels. I mean, it depends, right? Like,
could it be accessed from that far away?
If they wanted to, if anybody wanted to do that, yes. But the thing is, doing it to just like off the shelf consumer stuff is a lot harder to do in terms of hardware implants. If you wanted to do it that way, that's where we get more into the software level, like software backdoors, which we've seen in things like cryptography, right? It's posited that a lot of cryptography backdoors were put in by cooperation with like the NSA, for an example. I'm a little rusty on this stuff, but basically that becomes very valuable when you're slurping up all the internet data, and a lot of that's encrypted. But if you know how to quickly break the encryption, well, now you can see the contents. And that's where that comes in. And yeah, it's
a lot of people say that kind of hardware is installed into our power grid.
Depends, I would say. Well, God, I have forgotten. I think China makes a lot of our like power transceivers and stuff. But
Make a ton of it.
I honestly, from what I've seen and the people I talk to that work in all this stuff, I don't think physical implants are quite needed. Like the things are just not secure remotely, like externally. Like if you don't want to, literally, I think it was yesterday, maybe, I don't know. It's something that news that has come over the last few weeks where our own government is saying everyone, I think it was actually to their own government employees to use Signal, use iMessage, use encrypted chat. Do not use text messages because China they're just in all of the telco systems right now, which means they would be able to read the text messages, right? They didn't need hardware implants that I know of to do this. Maybe they did that to get in, but now they're in that system, right? Like I've helped in environments that a foreign adversary had gotten into, and it took a bunch of time to evict them and find where they are. And that was done all remotely, right? Like there's a lot of this stuff doesn't require like the James Bond type hardware to get in. And
Interesting.
yeah, that's a tricky topic.
Interesting. Do you worry about it?
I mean, there's so many things to worry about though. Like yes, kind of. There's once you've seen enough like horror shows though, you're like, oh wow, everything's just broken. And society as a whole, it's amazing that it operates. Just the levels of trust. Like one person is all it takes. With enough well-placed like damage, and whether it's security or just electrical power grids, all these things, there's all of it can just tip over, right? With just enough of a push. And like everything's that way. It's not just security. Yeah, so I don't know. I kind of just lump it all together of like, this is a really good experiment for humanity. I mean, humans have been on this planet for, I don't know, some say 300,000 years, right? Like, we're living in the best time. There's, I don't think there's a single person alive today who would be like, yeah, bring me back at random more than 100 years ago. Sign me up. Like that's not a good. The odds are not good, right? Like we're the most comfortable we've been, most well off, on average across the earth in this last 100 years, and it's a good experiment. And things are volatile. I mean, that's kind of the consequence of freedom too, right? Like it's the people gotta maintain it.
What text messaging app do you use? Do you use?
I like Signal. Signal's great.
There's a lot of rumors that the CIA created Signal.
I'm sure they did. I mean, so I think they help fund it, actually. But they help fund a lot of things, our government, in many ways. But I mean, Signal is an amazing tool if you're an agent as well. Like you're going to be overseas in hostile environments and you need to communicate. How are you going to do that securely? Are you going to use a secure tool that stands out like a giant red flag because nobody else is using it? Probably not the greatest thing. It's like, hi, I'm an agent. I don't know what you're saying, but there's an agent right there, right? Like, I mean, obviously there's answers to that and stuff, but it's valuable as like, oh, that's just the tool everybody uses. Signal, and everybody's got that, right? Like that's valuable. Obviously there's always trade-offs, right? It's like it can be used for bad, it can be used for good, and who's bad and who's good and whose perspectives.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's how we communicate via Signal.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that how you communicate with everybody?
A lot of people, yeah. I mean, I'll meet them where they're at, right?
Gotcha.
Like my manufacturers and stuff don't use Signal. They've got different governments over them and things like that. Yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, whatever you use, I'll meet you there. But contextually, it matters. Like, okay, I'm on this platform, which can be seen by these adversaries. Cool. Noted. I'll make sure I keep that in mind, which is kind of the whole point of like the psychology. When you're being watched, changes how you behave in ways that can be negative. Like what's, if you're always being watched by somebody, what does that make you? How does that make you behave? So
Different.
So yeah. I mean, there's lots of other cool things in this catalog, like retro reflectors. So this is for picking up audio. This is standard audio bugs, right? Like, spying on what's happening in the room. What else we got? Lots of cellular based stuff. Now this is like 10 years old at this point, so a lot of this stuff is well known. Really tiny implants. So this is like probably a VGA cable here for like an older monitor, which made more sense back in 2008. Really tiny implant into that cable, tapped to one of the color signals, and it would allow somebody to kind of energize it with like a radio pointed at it, more or less, and then receive the signal bouncing back with the video signal encoded in the bounce. So then you'd be able to see what's on their screen.
Wow.
Really cool stuff, right?
What do you think was in the spy balloon that was traversing the...
I don't know. I haven't studied those well enough, but I mean, there's a lot of amateurs that just do that. Like they'll just set up a balloon and it's kind of like the ham radio space kind of in a way where they're just like, oh, we can track it. And there it goes around. And
let me rephrase that question. What could it have been?
I mean, I don't know, man. That's probably outside of my skill set and awareness and research, but I mean, it could be used like a balloon. I mean, I'd probably be using a drone more because the problem with balloons is they're much more higher altitude, which causes problems for a lot of electronic circuitry because it gets really cold and stops functioning. Also, you've got power that you got to deal with. So best you can get is battery. Batteries also start to fail at that level of cold, right? So you need special batteries, something to keep it warm, which means more energy. So you get it from solar power, probably. This is really low power stuff, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe just the value of how does someone respond to putting something in their awareness, which is absolutely a thing, right? How does someone respond? Which, I don't know, is similar to the drones that are popping up. And there's just like, I don't know where that's coming from. New Jersey had one recently, but there's lots of like drones in the sky. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I would love to find out. And is it collecting data or is it just seeing how people respond to unknown, unreported drones in the sky for, tactical knowledge in the future?
All right, Mike, let's get into some of the stuff that you make. I know you have exploding hard drives. You got the OMG cable. You're making all kinds of just crazy wazoo wizardry gadgets that I am just fascinated with. And so where did this kind of start? Did it start with the exploding hard drive, USB drives?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. Like, I had always been tinkering with things like those beam bots, right? But yeah, so I think it was on Twitter or something. I saw just a picture of somebody with a USB drive. The shell was open and there's just like a firecracker sitting inside of it. No idea if it worked or not, but I'm just like, everybody has like the same visceral response to seeing that. Like, oh shit, exploding thumb drive. And I'm like, what'd be cool is if it was worse. So USB rubber ducky. Got to explain what that is first for this to make sense. My now business partner, Hack5, kind of invented the USB rubber ducky, I don't know, like 15 years ago now, something like that. That does the same basic keystroke injection that I had demoed with the cable, right? Where you plug it in, it types something really fast, whatever you want to control a computer or whatever you want, right? I wanted one of those that also exploded. So first thing I had to do is if you open up a rubber ducky, there's not much space in there. It's all electronics. I'm like, okay, how can I shrink this really tiny so I have space for something that goes boom? So I spent a lot of time playing with that, right? Now, I didn't recreate a rubber ducky exactly. Like, it's a really, really limited version, like a few hundred keystrokes, really slow, done, right? That's it. Really hard to use. But it was tiny, and I shrunk it, and and it's just, I don't know, I think it was like 8 by 10 millimeters when I was done, like a pill, basically. That left the rest of the thumb drive empty that I could hook up with a little mini detonator and, some maybe a firecracker or two, and a bunch of confetti. And I rigged this up to a keystroke injection payload that opens a browser to an animation of Jack in the Box, and he's cranking it right on the screen. except it goes for an awkwardly long amount of time to build up tension. And it's going, and you're like,
That's what shows up on the screen when you plug it in?
So you're watching that, and then
My God.
pop, the drive blows up, confetti goes everywhere. And I'm like, yeah, that was cool. I just viewed that as fun.
Yeah.
Another type of art or something like that. Put it out on the internet, and it was like, that's crazy. A lot of people asked me to sell that. Now, no, that's a terrible idea for so many reasons, liability, etc. When you put something into the world that can be used negatively, it's always worth gaming out. Like, how bad can it go, and can you prevent some of it? Which I've done a lot with the cable. But in this case, it was just something I wanted to put out there. But now, at that point, I had a really tiny ducky, right, that I could, well, maybe I could put it in other things. And eventually, I got the idea, probably in like doing my IT job, looking on Amazon for spare parts for hardware and stuff. I noticed there were like USB cable repair ends and boots. I'm like, wait, what? You can just get those? At the time, I didn't know much about manufacturing, right? Got some of those and realized there was enough space in them for the cables and this really tiny, fake ducky, right? Shove it in there, and I get the very first proof of concept of a malicious USB cable. I put that out, and I already told the story about that one where it gets out there and a lot of people like it, and then a lot of people wanted it. I think almost a year goes by before I'm like, you know what? I could make that way better. Like that was a toy. Like this is like a cool gimmick to show like a very basic prank. Barely even worked for that. What would a proper tool look like? And I was getting way more into like the concept of I want to do red teaming as well. So I'm combining those things. And like, okay, well, I need Wi-Fi, I need remote control to update payloads after it's already in play. Because the idea is you can either deploy a cable, like physically get inside, or you could just leave it in somebody's bag, leave it around, and eventually, people are going to take a cable sometimes, and they'll bring it in with them to the secure space. You're like, cool, I didn't have to even go in. Great. Which creates some interesting legal problems, which we can get into that I've also solved. But that kind of is just how it kept evolving. And then at that point, it's like, okay, this is a real tool. At the time, I was thinking I should do this in a way that I just make it open source and everyone could make their own.
Are we still talking about the USB?
Yeah, USB cable.
Okay.
And that's I thought about that, right? Like I was prototyping this cable, this new one, like on a desktop mill for cutting PCBs, right? Like I was pushing the limits on this machine where you can mill a PCB. So the PCB, actually, I got a little problem with this. So a PCB, like here's a complete product. This is a Raspberry Pi, right? When I say PCB, I'm talking about just the green part here.
Okay.
It's basically a fiberglass and epoxy with a thin layer of copper on it that gets turned into traces, and that connects all of these components. These like the black thing there, that's a component, and all the little things you see on there, they're soldered on. That's components with copper traces connecting them together electrically, right?
Okay.
So I used a mill to kind of cut out the copper traces, and I would assemble in my garage lots of different test versions of what this cable could look like. And I got the idea, kind of going back to the defense distributed concept where, open source is this, people can make it on a desktop mill, go that direction. What I learned over the 12 months of revising is it's really hard to do this. Like DIY was just not in the cards. Like nobody was going to be able to do this. I'm like, okay, well, let's throw out the DIY. I can just turn up the complexity. There's PCBs with 2 layers, like copper on each side, right? That's the common one. I can make those in my garage, but okay, what if I want 8 layers or something like that? That gets really expensive. We're talking every time I want to do a run of an 8-layer PCB, 6-layer PCB is like a minimum $1,000.
Okay.
Like I have to send that off to a factory. They're using lasers and all kinds of crazy X-ray inspection stuff to do this. So I'm like, okay, if I can use that, how far can I go? And that kind of is how I evolved into making a more and more and more complex cable that is like the latest generation OMG cable. It does all of these different things. And yeah.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, so how did you go? So you went from the exploding USB
Yeah.
to the what do you call it? What do you call the USB?
The exploding USB?
The other one.
The OMG cable?
Yes,
Yeah. I just OMG cable.
but there was a hard drive. There was a USB cable that did with the OM. Or the
Oh yeah,
USB
so
drive.
like I guess I just kind of call it like early prototype tests. I was referring to it kind of at the time as like bad USB cable, which is not an accurate description. It was more of a nod to some research at the time that was called bad USB. That's where you would take an actual thumb drive. There's a few old thumb drives that you could take and reprogram the controller on it, actually do keystroke injection, among many other things. It was also a worm that would replicate to other thumb drives you would plug in. Cool concept, but
What was the first product you took to market?
OMG cable, definitely.
The OMG
Yeah.
cable?
So here's the thing: is I was making a lot of these things like for like personal use, but I would also kind of sell them to friends and stuff. It's kind of like the back alleys of DEF CON type situation. Like
Cool.
I wasn't advertising this, but it's like if you know me, I know you. Yeah, I'll give you some of these things.
Gotcha.
But it became clear like I had to start scaling up. Like the first batch of prototype OMG cables, I think it was 2019. I brought as many as I could. They took me. It was like 8 or 16 hours per cable, and 50% of them were failures because like that which is terrible. Like when you make something like an electronic product, usually you get like 95, 99% yields, which means 1 to 5% are failures that you throw away. These things were so hard to self-assemble that I was throwing away 50% of what I made.
Wow.
So that automatically doubles the amount of time invested to make a cable. So I'm doing like 16-ish hours per cable to make them.
Wow.
Like that's
16 hours of cable?
silly. So yeah, I was kind of hitting my limit of like what I could accomplish with the time I had. And it's like, you know what? I need to learn how to like delegate this, outsource manufacturing assembly. Because I was also doing this like hand placing things. You go to an assembler. So there's a couple steps here. So I'm going to run you through basically the manufacturing pipeline that I slowly learned is important here. But first, Hack 5. It's really important to mention Hack 5 here. So USB rubber ducky, already mentioned. That's Darren Kitchen is founder of Hack 5. He, that was his baby, invented about 15 years ago. He's got so many other things like the land turtle, the Wi-Fi pineapple, just packets.
What is this? What are these?
They're similar to the ant
What's the
kettle,
land
right?
turtle?
Exactly, right? So all of these are different kind of like hardware implants or hardware tools they're multi-purpose, but often used for offensive security. So like the land turtle is like a network implant that can control a computer, but also like sniff up network data or just do malicious network stuff. What else? Wi-Fi pineapple. This is just a little box with antennas on it that allows you to do network attacks, right? Really cool stuff.
Network what?
Network-based, so Wi-Fi attacks. Like you can break into Wi-Fi. You can. They call them like man in the middle concept. I like to refer to it as mischief in the middle. But basically, you've got your device here and like the wireless access point here, right? They're talking. But you bring in a Wi-Fi pineapple and it can kind of intercept in between the two. There's so many different ways you can do this. There's no one single way. It's lots of Wi-Fi based tooling. Another example, it's not so much relevant these days, but when you connect to like your free Wi-Fi access points, coffee shops and stuff, your phone remembers that. Typically, you've told it to remember that usually. So next time you're in range, it's going to automatically connect, right? The Wi-Fi pineapple, for instance, can say, guess what? I'm that Wi-Fi too, right? So if I pull up one right here and put it next to you or just anywhere, you happen to be, your phone's going to be like, oh, that I know that Wi-Fi. Let me connect to it, right? So that type of stuff, there's just so many different attacks that I couldn't possibly run through all of them. But that just as an example, like there's so many different approaches to security. Like we think about computers and like plug in USB in, but yeah, there's other things. There's the network, there's the wireless, there's near field communication with like badges and things like that. Totally different tools, totally different specialties and focuses. Like the badge readers you don't think of as like computer security for the most part. It's like it's just building access, right? But that's all one whole thing.
Interesting.
When you're doing proper, complete security awareness and testing.
Well, let's take a quick break.
Yeah.
When we come back, I want to get into what is the actual OMG cable.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Perfect. The economy has been a major burden on Americans. Wages are flat, expenses are up, and it keeps getting harder to pay all the bills without reaching for credit cards. If you're a homeowner and you're frustrated with that cycle, I want you to make a 10-minute, no-obligation call today to the people over at American Financing. Interest rates have dropped, and if you're constantly carrying a credit card balance each and every month with a rate in the 20s, American Financing can show you how to put your hard-earned equity to work and get you out of debt. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are saving their customers at an average of $800 a month. And if you get started today, you may not have to make the next month's mortgage payment. Call American Financing today, 866-781-8900. That's 866-781-8900. Or go to americanfinancing.net/SRS. You sign up for something, forget about it after the trial ends, then you're charged month after month after month. The subscriptions are there, but you're not using them. 85% of people have at least one paid subscription going unused every month. Thanks to Rocket Money, I can see all my subscriptions in one place and cancel the ones I'm not using anymore. And now I'm saving more money. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money's dashboard gives you a clear view of your expenses across all of your accounts and keeps you informed with alerts if bills increase in price, there's unusual spending activity, or if you're close to going over budget. Rocket Money will even automatically scan your bills to find opportunities to save and lower your bills. Then you can ask them to negotiate for you. They'll deal with customer service so you don't have to. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/SRS today. That's rocketmoney.com/SRS. rocketmoney.com/SRS. All right, Mike, we're back from the break. We're talking about the OMG cable, but I want you to discuss and talk about exactly what it is that the OMG cable does and show us an example. And for those that are listening, if you go to Mike's Everyday Carry, does a phenomenal job at actually showing what it does real time on computers, on phones. It's fascinating. But go ahead and give us the show us what it is and walk us through what exactly it does.
Yeah, definitely. Let's pull one off. It's a visual. There's a good one. So OMG cable, right? Looks exactly like one of the many USB cables you've got. And if it doesn't, I got a whole bunch more here to guarantee it does.
Sure, yeah. Pull that. Let me see that. Yeah, so it's got a whole line of them.
Yep.
And I got the complete set.
Yeah, you did.
Watch out. But yeah, so each one of these fit a different phone or USB drive?
Yeah, I mean, so basically, think about
I should say.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the different, think of it as camouflage, basically. It's like, what's the environment? Did they use white cables? Do they use USB-A, USB-C? Is it a Mac shop? Cool, they're going to have lightning on one end. Maybe, if they got the older phones. If it's newer phones, cool, and USB-C. And it's really about blending in to fit what's already in place. So you could swap it out, or you can do other things. There's a lot of different approaches and techniques you can have when you have a device that is physically invisible, and it just hiding in plain sight. So that's the physical aspect of it, and that took me a huge amount of time of shrinking down the components, which I will describe in just a second. But shrinking it down it just took absurd amounts of time. Just designing the PCB that goes in here, and then beyond that, just the entire process of integrating the PCB into a cable. That just took like a year, basically.
Well, before we get into how you manufactured it, let's talk about what it does.
Yeah, exactly. So the PCB inside of here, what it does is when you plug it into it's primarily targeting laptops and desktops. It's got a PCB that will wirelessly kind of light up, and it'll connect back to you. There's so many different ways you can configure it, but this wireless connection allows remote connection into the cable. Get a full web UI in your web browser, right? Whether it's on your phone or laptop. Can even connect out to the internet, and you can connect to this thing from anywhere on Earth if you do it that way. What's it do though? You got control of this wirelessly. The main thing,
when you say it can connect to the internet, does it bypass passwords?
No, you still got to have like a wireless network it can connect to, or you bring one in. Like if I open my phone right now and looked at all the wireless networks, I bet there's probably one in there I could connect to. If not, like, are you going to notice like a free coffee shop Wi-Fi nearby?
No,
why not? For instance, right? There's the flexibility is the name of the game with this. There's no one way to use it. There's so many ways, because in a red team scenario, you don't know what you're up against, and you're going to need some options to circumvent a problem. But yeah, still, what does it even do? You're connected to it, but it primarily emulates a keyboard. It says, I'm a keyboard, and it types really fast. So what does that do? Literally anything I could do sitting at the computer at the keyboard. Yeah. So whether that's implanting malware or whatever it may be, right? That's kind of the basic functionality of it. But I mean, it's not it. USB cables can often connect a keyboard to a computer. You're sitting at a desk, swap out that cable, and this can now intercept the keystrokes, which is really good. Just like one classic use case is if the machine is locked. I mean, you can type all you want, but you're at a lock screen. You need to get past the lock screen. What do you need to get past the lock screen? You need the password, right? How do you get the password? There's a lot of ways. I mean, you could call up the person and effectively ask them for it by saying, I'm IT or something like that. But if you're deployed between a keyboard, you can just pull it right off the lines. They're going to type that password every single time they log into the computer. You remotely see that. You rebuild a new payload that maybe when they go to lunch in the evening, when you know they're not at the machine anymore, it's just going to type in that password, automatically unlock the machine, and then do all the nefarious things you want it to at that point.
So you just have full access to the computer.
Yeah, at that point,
You can see everything. You can access anything, so long as you capture the password from the keystrokes.
Yeah, so not so much seeing. There's a lot of it depends, right? But it's
Is it like a screen share, like that team viewer thing?
Not at this stage. So at this stage, we're just blindly sending keystrokes in, right? So as long as you know what OS it is or something like that, that's all you need on a desktop. Like I know if I hit Command Space, it's going to open up Spotlight on a Mac, and I can open up Chrome and then go to the address bar, do some things, right? For example, like that's a very repeatable series of keystrokes, and you can do them really fast once you know it. Just for an example.
Okay. All right.
So that's the basics of the very core functionality, and then you combine that with key logging, and suddenly you're getting a bigger picture here. But there's also other.
Hold on, I want to go down.
Yeah, totally.
I'm a dummy with the shit. So,
yeah, let's go deep.
So what would you? So now I didn't even understand that, to be honest, when we did the EDC pocket dump. So basically, So in that little window, you said there will be a window that might pop up for.
Oh yeah, so you see a little
second.
window blink, right? That's basically your terminal. In that case, there's a lot of things I could do, but in that case, on that, I think it was.
So you could put some type of a Trojan horse or something in there
Yep.
and implant it in the computer, like very
Exactly right.
through a series of keystrokes.
Exactly. And then if you detect the Trojan on there and you remove it, and the cable's still in play, which it's designed to be, just put it right back on.
No shit.
Which is absolutely a thing that has happened with a bunch of my customers that they have told me that, they did an engagement with a very high profile client. We can go into these types of things, but that reinfection vector is exactly what they used.
Do you prompt it, or does it just automatically do it when you put it in the computer?
Either or. So all about flexibility. So you can program this a couple different ways. So what I showed was me remotely connecting to it and I hit go. But this can be configured that when it powers up, when it gets plugged in, it powers up. It can immediately run a payload. It can wait a series however long you want, and then run a payload.
Is the payload the actual keystroke? Or
Yeah, exactly. So when I say payload, it's the series of keystrokes that gets run.
And the malware or the Trojan horse or whatever?
You can. There's ways of typing out, like if you got like a small executable that you want to transfer over, there's a couple of ways to do that. Like you just use the keystrokes to download it, right? You can download stuff from like the terminal, for instance, or I could use Chrome and download it there and go to the downloads folder and open it up there.
Through keystrokes?
Yep. I can
Holy
navigate
shit.
everything with keystrokes.
So you could, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing with this shit, but I'm learning.
We can do some fun stuff.
So you could send somebody an email and with a downloadable whatever.
Yep, that's one
virus,
way. Yep.
and then plant that cable on them. They plug the cable in. It does the keystrokes automatically to open Chrome, log into their email, download the thing.
Yeah, that's one way.
and
Yep.
Go to the downloads folder, download it, then you're in.
Yep,
And it
that's
all
one way.
happens within like a couple of seconds.
Yep. That's one way. I mean, I probably wouldn't email it to them because if I was going to email it, I probably include an email that convinces them to just run it for me.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm up against a hardened target where they're not as susceptible to that, they're unlikely to do it. I'm like, okay, well, let's get a cable that'll do it for me. As an example, right? This can also do mouse movements too if we need. Lots of control there. And yeah, it's you can also So the malware, right? You can download that. You can also type it back out. It's called base64. It's just a whole bunch of. It looks like random garbage characters. If you open up an executable with Notepad, roughly, staying high level here, you're going to see a bunch of garbage text, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you type that same text out into Notepad and save it. It's that executable. So I
No
can type
kidding.
that back into the computer. And boom, there's the executable, which is something we've done quite a bit in environments where they're checking what is being downloaded from the internet. I'm like, okay, you're looking at the internet, cool. I'm gonna just type this little piece of malware back into the computer. Lots of cool tricks you can do like that.
Wow.
It's fun. And so there's other aspects of this too. So, keystroke injection, mouse injection. I showed you the key logging. Oh, you were asking about the ways of triggering it. So I showed you remotely. I can click go. We can have it boot up and go. There's also what I refer to as geofencing. Basically, it's got wireless in there, so it can just look at the nearby networks and figure out where it is and where it isn't. And you can trigger or block things on that. And there's a self-destruct function where it'll erase everything on it. Now, it sounds super nefarious, but it's actually prompted by legal. A lot of places have strict controls. So with the USB rubber ducky, does the keystroke injection. It looks like a thumb drive by Hack5. That's my business partner. They invented that 15 years ago ish. What they would do is you could put like salaries.xls on it. So it's like, oh, that must be the company's salaries, and litter it in the parking lot, right? That's one way that people would be convinced to pick it up in the parking lot, bring it inside, plug it in, see what's on it, right? And boom, they've just infected themselves with malware, right? There's a downside to that, which is depending on how bad that payload is. If you're a red team, you're an employee of this company, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got malware sitting on a loose object that anyone could pick up and bring it home, bring it into another business, and now you have just infected another business. That's not ideal, right? So certain environments, their legal team is like, no way. You put geofencing on this. You have a payload where it boots up and it just says, am I in the office? Is the corporate Wi-Fi present? Cool. If not, completely wipe everything.
Are you shitting me? So you... Wow. Wow. So it knows where it's at.
Yep. And where it isn't.
Holy shit.
So this scan right here, this was done by Lumafield. They've got a CT scanner, which is basically an X-ray scanner that takes a lot of X-rays, little slices across a product, and then assembles it into a 3D object. So Lumafield, I actually just did some work with them to sit down and talk about their machines they use for all kinds of things. Manufacturing inspection, but also starting to get into like a lot of security stuff, like where you can literally see inside. This is a scan of the end of one of my cables. So right here is the connectors, USB connectors, and over here we got the components. So this is the main processor, and this little thing over here is the antenna. You can kind of see the USB wires running out the bottom there.
Wow.
And the cool thing is, let's see if I can turn this. There it is. That is the whole internal, and lots more components kind of on the back. You can use this to step through every layer and just see literally every little detail about something. So if you got untrusted hardware, for instance, that scanner would reveal all of the internals. In this case, it's just really cool, and it shows off, here's what's inside my cable that's doing all the magic.
You got to get that framed.
I think I'm gonna. It's a beautiful scan.
That is very cool.
Yeah. They have done a lot of work to kind of democratize the access to CT scans. CT scanning machines are normally this industrial machine that's really hard to use and really expensive. Like we're talking like $1 million+ for machines, roughly. They do a subscription where it's like the cost of a maintenance contract. And they did some amazing stuff to make it super usable. Like you can see me turning this. It's super easy to use the outputs and set it up. And they did something magic. And I don't know that they communicate this, but the sensor on a X-ray machine normally decays and you have to replace it. They've somehow made like an eternal scanner, so it reduces the cost as well. Which I don't know. I'm completely obsessed with their technology right now. So sorry for the momentary splurge on that, but
oh, that is super cool. Super cool.
Good stuff.
Who are your customers?
I got everyone basically. So here's the thing. Me personally, I've got one customer, Hack5, and we can probably go into the story about how we met. But basically, when I was making these things by myself and I needed to take the jump into manufacturing, had a lot of bad experiences, but Hack5 was amazing. They're like, let me just kind of show you the ropes, right? Like manufacturing, running a business, all this stuff. Darren has been great to me. So I sell all of my stuff to him, and all of my products are available on Hack5 as a result. They take care of who gets it. And they have very tight export controls. There's a lot of countries they will not ship to.
Can I just go on there and buy it?
Yeah, you can. You're not in a prohibited country.
Wow.
So yeah, you can just go on there and buy it, and hobbyists can use it. Security researchers, awareness training. So that's where you go on stage and kind of just show off concerning things so that people will change their behavior. And primarily red teams. There's lots of red teams in the private space, Fortune 500s, military, industrial, government, all have their own equivalencies to that. And again, the red team is where you are emulating what an actual attacker does from end to end, from penetrating to getting into the company, and the entire chain of hopping around and getting to the crown jewels, pulling those back out. That is red teaming, and this is used a lot there. So I have a lot of customers who will also reach out just for advice on how to use the cables, or maybe they've run into a situation like that legal constraint. Like, hey, this is cool, but like, oh yeah, cool. Let me just fix that and solve that legal problem. Now, I don't know like the full scope of what they're doing, but it's like, oh, here's a problem. I can solve that for you. There's, yeah, they are the people I've talked to, and now I know a lot more than I can talk about here, but there are plenty of people who have said, yeah, you're going to Shawn Ryan, go ahead and you can talk about it this way. Couple people.
Who are those people?
Yeah, so
Is it my former employer?
I mean, possibly.
Fuckers.
So I don't know that level of detail and don't really want to, but as long as they're part of like the OK entities. Yeah,
Are there
I'll
any
give you some
okay
advice.
entities?
Yeah, I know exactly right. The ones who
That's a
aren't.
whole other podcast.
This is going to be defined on who is or isn't going to put me in prison. So that's my definition of good in this scenario, is keeping those people happy. But to be clear, there's another advantage here, which is some of these places are critical infrastructure that they work at or are tasked with securing or improving the security. So we all benefit from that. Like, I don't want a place that has some form of nuclear material in it getting compromised, because the people who want to compromise those places are probably looking to hurt me in some way, right? So let's help them. So the other feature kind of added to these cables recently is, we call it HidX Stealth Link. It's kind of the branding of it to explain what it is. But ultimately, still acting as a keyboard, but now it's got bidirectional data transfer. So like a network interface, but without ever showing as a network interface. You can send data back and forth between the computer, and it just looks like a keyboard to the target system. This was used for quite a few people in a lot of environments, but in this case, the critical infrastructure was not looking for this type of exfiltration technique, and it worked really well. Got them in, and they achieved their objectives with this critical infrastructure, and got it fixed. I was told that my name got put into a report that I will never have access to, but that's extremely cool. It's like, cool, I got my name into a report to fix some critical infrastructure with a technique that we developed with my team. And honestly, I'd love to pause and even talk about that team, because while I make the hardware and the manufacturing and run the business, all the tricks this does heavily about the actual firmware that runs on this, and that requires multiple people to pull off.
Let's talk about your team.
Yeah, so there's a couple pieces of this. But one guy's retired and just loves working on hardware. Prior to this, I mean, he did a lot of things, but prior to this, he was working on the firmware for police body cameras. So very, very interesting background there. Another guy is blind, and he does kind of the UI you've seen. It's kind of poetic. He's the blind guy is in charge of the UI. He's got a lot of experience.
What is UI?
Yeah, so the visual interface, when you open it up in the control panel and you got all the buttons and stuff in there.
Hold on. Pick that cable up.
Yeah, yes.
When you open that thing up and look at the control panel and the buttons in there?
Wirelessly. So when you connect to it wirelessly with your web, and then you open your web browser and then connect to the IP address, you get a web page, right?
Okay.
With all the buttons on it that give you the controls. You can view the key logs,
Gotcha.
open the hundreds of payloads you can save on here and run them. All that's purely visual. You just click on stuff. It doesn't have to be. You can automate it. But yeah, it's primarily visual, and it allows all the cool controls to happen. So got another guy who, in education, and a lot of them are familiar with, the government contracting spaces as well. It's a fairly small team, but they've been along for the ride the whole time and just constantly interested in picking up just challenges. And like the way the keylogger works on here is like, that's not supposed to be possible.
How did you get this word out? How are you marketing this?
That's a really good question, actually. Is I have not done any marketing yet. This thing kind of has its own legs, which
I mean, I could imagine, but I mean, what was the first thing? Like, how did...
I think I just put a video out. Video of like, hey, like I made this with my mill, check it out. Here's what it can do.
Excuse me.
Yeah, no worries. And here's what it can do. And then it just took off. Like that was mostly in the InfoSec space. So, it kind of went around the hacker community and the professional security professionals. And at some point, it just kind of goes outside of that bubble because it gets enough traction. Like Vice took it, Forbes took it. There's so many different high profile.
This has been in Forbes?
Oh yeah, this has been in Forbes a couple times. Look, Mom, I made it to Forbes. Yeah, it's been pretty wild. I am at the point though where I am starting to think about focusing purely on this because it has just become this awesome monster that takes a lot of my time as well as running, Red Team as well. So that's probably something I'm going to be pivoting into very shortly and focusing on that, helping the team and seeing what more we can do. Probably going to relax for a bit though.
Good for you.
I'm tired.
How is business? Is it going well?
It's very good. So I'm probably long overdue to jump.
What do you think you'll grow into with this?
I have no idea. I've never had a plan ever on any of this. It's just what's the thing and the opportunity at the moment, and how can I play with that in an interesting way? Which there's a lot of things why you would want to plan in business, but I don't know. Maybe eventually I'll have a plan.
Do you have any fear about this being on the market, so available?
It's been 5-6 years now, and I'm very proud of the result of it with all the places where it's been fixed and the very low abuse scenarios. Like we're very intentional when we think about, okay, let's add a feature to this, but let's figure out who wants this feature, who's going to make use of it. Like for instance, the number one that I want to avoid is stalkerware, it's mouseware stuff. People look at this and they're like, oh yeah, I need that for that. I'm like, no, I'm going to make that hard. That's not as valuable to a red team professional. We're trying to get into corporate infrastructure. We're trying to do Ocean's 11 shit on Fortune 10 or something like that.
This would be so easy to plant in any government facility.
Yeah. Yeah.
I shouldn't say any government facility, but it might be. It's been a while since I've been to a skiff, but they seem to have a pretty pretty good gauge on what's going on. But I'm talking DC, Congress,
yes,
senators,
absolutely,
politicians. Those types would be. It would be a fucking joke just to. You could hand them out.
Yeah.
And
so
they'll use them.
Here's the thing, though, is that's the other aspect, is there's a lot of very detectable defaults. You have to really know how to use the tool to work around these things. But by design, it's supposed to be detectable if you're doing good security. This is going to light up, and it's literally, it announces itself as an OMG cable out of the, effectively out of the box, right? Mm-hmm. So hopefully you're at least checking that.
In all of your experiences is doing red cell operations.
Yes and no.
How many people do you think are testing that?
So here's the thing, is the people who are that low on the bar of security, I don't need these to get in. I just pick up a phone. I send an email.
Okay, fair enough.
That's that sweet spot where it's all, you map out all the desires, the capabilities, and the threats, and the negative consequences, and just thread the needle to get just that sweet spot. And we spend a lot of time thinking about that, but right now I just point to the last 5 years of look, the results. And that way, I can talk all day about how much intent we put into it, but the results are far better than the intent in terms of convincing somebody. Another thing, so I think I showed you these should actually ship deactivated for multiple reasons, which you can imagine. There's a little, we call it the programmer. It's kind of a firmware tool. So you plug this into your computer to activate it, right? This doubles for multiple other things. So if you do a self-destruct on it, you recover the cable with this if you wanted to. You have to get it back out of the field. But self-destruct will just put it into a neutral cable that's just not harmful at all. Really good if you can't pull the thing back out of the field. You want to neutralize all your stuff. However, if you're blue team and you found this, you can also use one of these to dump every bit of firmware that's running on here, which will include payloads and all this stuff. So as long as it hasn't been self-destructed, you can just dump that and do a full forensics on it. So they get to practice as well.
Wow.
So yeah, we've done a lot of things that kind of show off the forensic capabilities and ways of approaching. So it's meant to be holistic for security, not just purely offensive use. But it's really about raising the bar, basically.
Interesting. I mean, when I look at that, I've always heard RIT guys always telling us, don't be buying shit off Amazon. If you're gonna get an iPhone cable, get it from the Apple store, not from Amazon. If you're getting Wi-Fi extenders, go from the manufacturer, not some shit on Amazon. Is China putting this shit into our ecosystem?
I doubt it. So these are highly targeted. So it's kind of
Things like this.
yeah, exactly. But I think it's good to think about it like let's step back to like a different type of crime, like pickpocketing versus like Ocean's 11 bank job, right? Like this is more on the the bank job, whereas pickpocketing, that's what you're more likely to experience as just a random individual. Like that's going to be more equal to like phishing emails, like really low grade commodity malware type stuff that's delivered over email. Like the risk of physically delivering this stuff is too high. Or in the case of like, oh, we're going to contaminate the shelves effectively, online or not. That's so high cost and so easy to find. That's like you just need one person to detect that this happened, and we'd all hear the news story. Which kind of reminds me of that Bloomberg grain of rice story, right? Which was complete bullshit. My friend Joe Fitzpatrick is a great guy to talk about this. But basically, there was this Bloomberg news story that a little grain of rice component was found implanted in a bunch of servers, right? And it just doesn't make sense, which is why that story didn't make sense, because there are so many other ways of approaching that are way less detectable. If there's anybody, like, how do you control where that goes? It's very hard to control where implanted hardware goes. And if you don't have control, anyone's going to find it. I think like the closest you can get to that might be that Israeli pager story, where they had to create a fake manufacturing plant to develop these things. And that is how they controlled where it went. So,
Hold on. I'm not familiar with this.
Yes.
Go into this?
Yeah, totally.
This is the Israeli pager story where they blew up all the Hezbollah guys.
Yes, exactly. So
Fascinating.
thousands of pagers. I think it was a batch of 5,000 and 4,000 went out. So yeah, a lot of booms. But basically what they did is set up a fake manufacturing company, right? And I think they had their own manufacturing plant and everything. They licensed a legitimate model of pager from a legitimate company, well known. This is a typical relationship for a lot of hardware. You just license it and you sell it, and then you're like, yeah, put my name on it. Depends on what it is. Like obviously Apple's going to do their own thing, but we're talking pagers, right? This is like 30-year-old technology here. So they did that. They had a bunch of, they even went as far as getting a bunch of random customers and gave them good pagers. But then they got their Hezbollah client. And I'm always curious about how they did that. I have some postulations, but they got their Hezbollah client and they made exploding pagers for them. They put high explosives in part of the battery and a detonator in there. And basically it was configured to detonate this thing after a specific message was sent to the pager. And the way pager networks work are all like broadcast, so you can send one message that goes to all pagers in the network, which is probably what they did. Anyway, this was in play for, I don't know, I think it was like 1 or 2 years. Like these are out there and slowly going through, the IT operations of, hey guys, we got new hardware, and slowly sending them out to the field. I think they were encrypted pagers. It was funny in some ways that this pager focus was entirely because they knew their cell phones were compromised. Like, oh, let's start using pagers, or maybe it was the walkie-talkies, I forget. But they were moving away from one comms to another to avoid surveillance, and as a result, they got explosions. But that's the kind of like level of control. Like if those got out to someone else, which I mean, there's still opportunity for that. Like they're not watching one pager go from hand to hand to hand. Like it's like, oh, we deployed it to Hezbollah, and it's reasonable to assume that this level of dissemination with this margin of error and other people touching them, and you know, they probably did the math on that, right? I didn't, but that's kind of a good example of like how far you can go and like the risks of discovery. Stuff like Stuxnet. Stuxnet's another good example of, I think it was the Iranian enrichment facilities where, I can't remember the full story here, but there was like a thumb drive with a worm on it, and it basically got carried into this enrichment facility, and it would damage the part of the enrichment machinery, right? But didn't do it all at once. It would randomly pick one or the other because you don't want to be discovered, right? If you did it all at once, you're like, oh, something's up. It's like, oh, one went up, whatever, it must be bad, right? Like, so there's like the psychology of making sure it doesn't seem like it's something to investigate. It's like, oh, bad machines, it must be bad process. So they kept doing that, and eventually, I can't remember how it got discovered, but there was a issue where it started spreading around elsewhere, like the worm or something like that, and somebody noticed it, I think. I can't fully remember, but there was a discovery event because it kind of got too wide. And once it's discovered, okay, now you can defend against it. Now you can find them in the wild. And dude, the moment somebody found anything in our stuff, they're going to tell the world, like, hey, look at this cool thing I found. I'm a security researcher. So that said, on the flip side, there's plenty of places we don't look. Most of the stuff you find in there is just vulnerabilities. Like, oh, I didn't think there would be a hole on whatever, some aspect of a product. Like, oh, if you just log in 10 times and do this, you get in, you bypass everything. It's like, wait, what? You do what? That's the type of stuff that's typically, well, nobody thought to try that. So yeah, it really depends. Physical implants are much easier to discover because, I mean, they're physically there. You can't revoke them. You can't be like, oh, self-delete. It's there. I mean, not counting the pager situation. It's a different type of delete. But, delete in a way that doesn't leave the evidence around.
Yeah. I'm like, what's in your head, man? What's next for you?
I don't know yet. I'm just going to...
What are you thinking about?
Like, I have been focusing more on personal stuff, just like hanging out with my kids, spending more time with them while I got the time, and they're growing. One's 14, so
you can shut it off.
No, yeah. So learning how to do that is part of it. So
I haven't learned how to do that.
Yeah, it's
when you do,
it's
let
hard,
me know,
dude. It's hard
because you love this. I can tell this is your passion.
Yeah.
You're moving into this full time. This is going to be your full time business.
Yep.
Give me a snapshot.
I mean,
what are some of your ideas?
Here's an example. So I'm reusing the same implant in a couple of ways. So I mean, this is an easy one. So USB adapters, basically a cable, right? Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I had a thing where customers were enjoying the firmware so much for like payload development, they would get the cable and cut the end off. I'm like, dude, no, that's my baby. What are you doing? So, there we go. Keychains that, don't have the cable on it. Cool. Got that. Now here's another one. Are you familiar with USB data blockers?
No.
So it's a commonly recommended like secure charging mechanism. You're like, oh, I can't trust the airport charger or something like that. You're like, well, get a data blocker.
Can you trust an airport charger?
Mostly. I mean, I'm personally more concerned about the quality of the electricity coming out there frying my phone than I am about like a data situation, because going back to the discoverability, you put something in a wide space like that, once it gets detected, you hear about it. We've not heard about it.
Gotcha.
And especially in a secure space, like all the airport locations. Like everybody's on camera, right? Like good luck. It would be really hard. There's advisories that come out, and I think the FBI was doing them. They get a lot of flack for that because there's no like proof it existed, but I don't know. Like I don't have the intelligence they have either. So, I mean, there's things you could do. I also don't consider my creativity to be all inclusive on all ways you can do something negative. Like there's plenty of people with different motives and minds than me. So yeah, we'll see. It'd be a cool story, but yeah, data blockers. That's the idea. You now have safe charging. I'm like, cool. I'll put one of my things in a data blocker. Now, cat and mouse.
Yeah.
I just thought it was funny, but just as an example, just kind of chase that a little bit. Go from there. I don't know. We'll see.
Do you have any wazoo crazy inventions that you're dreaming up?
I've done a lot on the manufacturing side. So I've had to invent so many tools and mechanisms, both for creating these cables, which turns into their own products. Because I'm teaching other people how to use them, and it breaks, and I got to do support for those products, and they're their own PCBs and everything. It's a hardware product with its own firmware just to test these cables at multiple stages. So I'm still packing these at home with the kids, and the envelopes, right? I got to label those. That gets really annoying over time. I'm like, I'm going to create a machine to label these. So I just keep chasing that down and seeing how much I can do. There's a guy called Cliff Stoll. He does a lot of really cool things, science, math. He's got a book on security, but he also makes something called Klein bottles. Total deviation here, but you'll see why. So Klein bottles are, a Mobius strip. You take a strip of paper and you pull the ends up, rotate, tape them together. Now you've got a 1D dimension. So if you follow it around on a pen, it's one dimensional. Klein bottle is a 3D version of that. Anyway, I think he lives in Palo Alto, small place. He runs like distribution entirely out of his house for that. So under his house, he has built an entire robotic warehouse system. Like drives the thing around, pulls the stuff out. I think that's cool as hell. And it goes back to like the old school hacker mindset of just doing that. I like that kind of stuff just catches me, and I'll like, okay, cool. I want to do as much manufacturing in home as I can, because my stuff is really small. But also let's just see how far I can take it, how much more I can optimize. Like this orange clip that goes on these things that I ship with, so you know which ones are bad. I've redesigned that like 6 times so far. Just
wow.
Like I don't know. I just want to see how much further can I take it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So are you manufacturing these yourself, or?
It's a mix. So the process for it, I'm going to go back to this PCB as a reference here, but real quick, the process that I'm kind of taking right now is I ask one manufacturer, make the PCB, the green piece here. Then that gets shipped to another place that assembles the components to the PCB. They're basically running it through high heat that melts solder, and they all get like glued to the board, right? Now you got a functional piece of and now once it's glued to the board, here's one of my implants, and we can get some close-ups later, but here is just one of them. That's one of the implants. That's the size of it.
This is what goes in the little USB thing.
Yep, inside the boot of the cable, basically.
This little bitty ass thing.
Yep.
Connects to the internet.
Yep. It's
wow. Why the fuck is my modem so big?
Yeah, I know. I mean,
serious, man. Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of compromises to make that happen. Like,
look at that damn thing.
Yeah. If you were not size constrained on that would be 10 times bigger, because it would be so much easier to make with 10 components instead of 2 or whatever. I forget how many I have in there. I think I got like 12. But times 10 the components is normally what you'd see. So that creates the need to do a lot of creative engineering to compromise and get small. But at some point, I'll show you here. I'll just press these. Here's that little one with the USB-C end on it, and here it's got a USB-C A. So that's kind of, okay, components are on there. One shop did the green PCB, one shop put all the components on there. Cool. Well, that's what I got right now, right? It's not a cable yet. So another shop going to help integrate that into cables. And so this other shop's going to integrate it into cables to some extent. There's still unfinished work to do, unfinished testing. Then, and if it's the woven cable, there's another factory that has to like do special cutting and crimping and searing of the ends so it doesn't unravel. Anyway, so 3-4 factories later, ships over to me. I'll do the finishing work on them. Sometimes it's closing the actual cables up, but at a minimum, it's testing everything, calibrating them, putting like that initial firmware on there, tons of QA and QC work, packaging, shipping it off to the Hack 5 warehouse. So
Wow.
lots of work.
So where do people find this product?
Yeah, so 2 places basically. You can go to the O.MG.LOL website. That's my primary website. Or you can go to my business partner. It redirects to my business partner effectively, which is Hack5, HAK5, hack5.org/OMG, and all of my products are up on their site.
Wow. That's incredible, man. That is incredible.
Fun stuff, man.
I can't believe. Have the agencies been in touch with you to come work with
Probably.
your science and technology department? Or
I'm not sure I would know.
you would know.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of interesting challenges too. Like,
I mean, I'm saying, that's actually not a joke. That's
oh yeah, totally. Yeah.
Very sharp guy, very inventive, very impressive.
I'm happy to help all kinds of people secure their environments. So, yeah, I mean, they know where to find me.
I'm sure they do.
Let's see. There's another thing might be interesting here is this kind of kicked off right when the pandemic kicked off.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, working with the factories, had to do all that remote, and that immediately ran into the chip shortage. I saw that come in from like 6 months before everybody else did. So immediately had to figure out all the supply chain logistics, where to find chips when they are out of the market everywhere, hoarding them, this is something I have put the first 2 or 3 years of profits entirely back into production, whether it's improving the PCB, improving the capabilities, or storing extra components because we're in the middle of a chip shortage so I can still make my stuff. That was a wild time. And it felt like there was just one thing after the other that was like, no, you can't sell these. No, the market's down. No, you can't have access to the chips. And just trying to find ways of working around that. Down to like all these little tiny components come in a really long piece of tape coiled up on a reel, right? I count those. I assemble those by myself as well. So, I got machines to count them and assemble them so I can just send it off to the assembler. There's so many different facets of running a hardware business that is like this that is really unexpected, and I'm just kind of learning on the fly. So, yeah.
Very impressive, Mike.
Thanks, man.
Well, I think we're wrapping up the interview, but I just want to say, man, you are a super sharp, fascinating individual, and what an amazing conversation.
Thanks, man.
Very inventive. Fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll be tracking you. Where can people find you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm all over the place. I definitely on Twitter _MG_. Lots of other social networks starting to form and fall apart and whatever they may be. I'll try to keep all of that on the contact page of the O.MG.LOL site, though.
Perfect. Well, Mike, I wish you the best of luck, and
thank you.
I can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Thanks.
All right, brother. Cheers.
Thank you.
No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.